I watched that video 3 times just to be certain. Mom was rehearsing her tears like an audition while Dad mumbled his apology lines. But the part that made my blood run cold was my sister's whisper right before she rang the doorbell. She said she had to drag me there today or she would lose everything. I opened the door, smiled, and asked exactly one question that made them all freeze. My name is Zara Barnes, and I am 34 years old. I live in a narrow, drafty duplex on the southern edge of St. Louis, a place I chose specifically because it was difficult to find. The paint on the walls is a shade of gray that most people would find depressing, but I find it calming. It is the color of neutrality. It is the color of a life that has finally stopped screaming. I had been living here for 9 months, 3 weeks, and 4 days when the silence was broken. I had spent the last year carefully erasing myself. I changed my phone number. I routed my mail to a post office box 3 towns over. I deleted my social media accounts, one by one, watching my digital history vanish into the ether. I was not running from the law. I was not running from a debt collector. I was running from the people who were supposed to love me. It was a Tuesday evening. The sky outside was a bruised purple, transitioning into a heavy, suffocating black. I was sitting on my second-hand beige sofa, a book resting open on my lap, though I had not turned a page in 20 minutes. The house was quiet. It was the kind of quiet you pay for with loneliness. And I had paid that bill gladly. Then, my phone vibrated against the wooden coffee table. It was a sharp, aggressive buzz that made me jump. I stared at the screen. The notification was bright and insistent. Motion detected. Front door. My heart hammered against my ribs. A sudden, violent rhythm that made my hands shake as I reached for the device. I did not get visitors. I did not order food delivery. I did not have friends who popped by. Motion at my front door meant a mistake, or it meant a violation. I unlocked the phone and tapped the ring notification. The screen went black for a second, the little white circle spinning, buffering, suspending me in a moment of pure dread. Then, the feed snapped into focus. The camera lens, with its slight fisheye distortion, curved the world at the edges, making the brick pillars of my porch look like they were bowing outward. But the 3 figures standing in the center of the frame were perfectly clear. I felt the air leave my lungs. It was them. My mother, Elaine, was wearing her beige trench coat, the one she saved for church and funerals. My father, Robert, stood slightly behind her, shifting his weight from one foot to the other, looking at the floorboards as if they were fascinating, and standing in front, checking her reflection in the darkened glass of my storm door, was my sister, Brianna. They were not ringing the doorbell. I checked the timestamp on the live feed. They had been standing there for 2 minutes already. I sat up straighter, bringing the phone closer to my face, squinting at the small screen. Why weren't they ringing? If they had found me, if they had driven all the way across the city to hunt me down, why were they just standing there? Then I tapped the live view button, and the audio kicked in. The sound was tinny and harsh, amplified by the wind that was whipping around the microphone, but their voices cut through the static. "You're slouching, Dad," Brianna said. Her voice was not loud, but it had that sharp, serrated edge that I knew better than my own name. "Stand up straight. You look like you're waiting for a bus. You're supposed to look heartbroken." I watched on the screen as my father straightened his spine. He looked tired. He looked old. "I just want to get this over with. Bree," he muttered. "Maybe she's not even home. The lights are dim." "She's home," Brianna said. She smoothed the front of her designer jacket, a piece of clothing that likely cost more than my car. "Her car is parked down the street. I checked the license plate. It is her." I felt a cold shiver trace its way down my spine. She had checked down the street. She had stalked the neighborhood before coming to the door. This was not a visit. This was a raid. "Okay, Mom, let me see the face," Brianna commanded. "On the screen?" My mother looked up at Brianna. Her eyes were dry. Her expression was one of mild annoyance, the look she usually wore when a waiter got her order wrong. Not like that, Brianna hissed. She reached out and physically adjusted my mother's shoulders, slumping them forward slightly. You look too stiff. You need to look like you haven't slept. Rub your eyes. Smudge the mascara a little bit. We need her to feel guilty the second she opens that door. I watched, paralyzed, as my mother obeyed. She lifted a hand and rubbed her eyes vigorously. When she pulled her hand away, she blinked rapidly, and her face softened into a mask of tragic, maternal longing. It was a transformation so instant, so practiced, that it made my stomach turn. Is this better? Mom asked. Her voice even sounded different now, wavering, fragile. Better, Brianna said. But don't overdo it. If you wail, she'll know it's fake. Zara is cynical now. Just keep it quiet. Silent tears are more effective. I stared at the phone. My grip was so tight my knuckles were white. I was witnessing a rehearsal. They were staging a play, and I was the unwilling audience of one. What do I say again? Dad asked, looking nervous. We went over this in the car. Dad, Brianna sighed, sounding exhausted by his incompetence. Don't improvise. You always mess it up when you improvise. Just say, we miss you, sweetheart. That is it. Short, simple. Let Mom do the heavy lifting with the crying. We miss you, sweetheart, Dad mumbled. More feeling, Brianna critiqued. Drop your voice an octave. Sound regretful. We miss you, sweetheart. Dad tried again. Fine, that will have to do. Brianna turned back to the door. She reached into her purse and pulled out a compact mirror, checking her teeth. Remember, the goal is to get inside. Once we are inside, we don't leave until she agrees to come tomorrow night. I don't like this, Brianna, Mom said, her voice dropping the tragic act for a brief second. She hates parties. She's going to say no. And then, Brianna said the thing that froze the blood in my veins. She snapped the compact mirror shut with a click that the microphone picked up like a gunshot. She turned to our parents, her face losing all its manufactured concern. Her eyes were hard, flat stones. She doesn't get to say no, Brianna whispered, but the microphone on the Ring camera was sensitive. High-fidelity technology designed to catch burglars. It caught every syllable. We have to drag her to that party tomorrow. If she doesn't show up, Grandma is going to change the papers. She told the lawyer she wants to see family unity before she signs the final trust execution on Friday. If Zara isn't there, the old woman might cut us all out. I stopped breathing. The world tilted on its axis. It was not about love. It was not about missing me. It was not even about the guilt or the control. Not really. It was about money. It was about the inheritance. Grandma Lorraine. I had assumed they were here to drag me back into their emotional meat grinder because they needed someone to punch down on. I thought they missed their scapegoat. But this was different. This was cold. Hard calculation. Grandma was changing the papers. The papers could only mean the estate plan. The trust fund that Brianna had been banking on since she was 16. If we lose that trust because she wants to play the victim, Brianna hissed, pointing a manicured finger at the door, pointing at me, though she didn't know I was watching. I will never forgive you two for letting her leave in the first place. So, get your faces right. We are not leaving here without her. My phone screen dimmed, asking if I was still watching. I tapped it furiously to keep the feed alive. Okay, Mom said. She took a deep breath. She looked at the door. I'm ready. Wait, Brianna said. She stepped back, positioning herself slightly behind Mom. To the left, she uncrossed her arms. Don't cross your arms. Dad, it looks defensive. Put your hands in your pockets. Look helpless. Dad put his hands in his pockets. Okay, Brianna said. Showtime. She reached out her hand toward the doorbell. I did not wait for the chime. I minimized the live view and went immediately to the History tab. My hands were trembling, not with fear anymore, but with a cold, electric rage. The Ring camera had a feature called pre-roll. It captured the 6 seconds of video before a motion event. But because I had the premium subscription and the hardwired model, it recorded everything from the moment the sensors tripped. The file was there. Motion. Front door. Today. 7:42 p.m. I tapped download. The little blue circle spun. Please. I thought, please don't crash. Please don't glitch. The bar filled up. Video saved to photos. I didn't stop there. I immediately opened my cloud storage app. I uploaded the video to a folder named Receipts. Then I emailed the file to myself. Then I texted it to my secondary secret number. I had the rehearsal. I had the direction. I had the motive. I had Brianna saying, if she isn't there, the old woman might cut us all out. I stood up from the sofa. My legs felt strange, heavy and light at the same time. I walked to the hallway mirror. I looked at myself. I looked tired. I was wearing an oversized t-shirt and sweatpants. My hair was in a messy bun. I looked like a woman who was hiding. I took a deep breath. I reached up and smoothed my hair. I did not put on makeup. I did not change my clothes. I did not want to look put together. I wanted to look exactly like what I was, a woman disturbed in her sanctuary. But my face needed to change. I stared into my own eyes in the glass. I saw the fear there, the old, conditioned response to their presence, the little girl who just wanted everyone to stop yelling. I forced that little girl into a box and locked the lid. I practiced a smile, not a happy smile, a polite smile, the kind of smile you give a stranger who has knocked on your door to sell you pest control services. A smile that says, I am listening, but I am not buying. Ding dong. The sound of the real doorbell echoed through the empty duplex. It was loud. It sounded like a gavel banging on a judge's desk. I checked my watch. 12 minutes. It had been 12 minutes since the first motion alert. They had spent 12 minutes perfecting their lies on my front porch. 12 minutes of directing, of staging, of fixing makeup and rehearsing lines. I walked to the door. My footsteps on the hardwood floor were silent. I was wearing thick wool socks. I reached the entryway. I could see their shapes through the frosted glass panel. They were still. They were in character. I placed my hand on the cold brass knob. I did not hesitate. I did not ask, who is it? I yanked the door open. The rush of cold November air hit me first, smelling of dead leaves and coming rain. Then came the visual assault. It was a masterpiece of performance art. My mother stood front and center. Her eyes were red-rimmed, glistening with fresh moisture. Her hands were clasped in front of her chest, clutching a tissue. Her lip quivered, a physical tremor that was truly impressive. My father stood beside her, his shoulders slumped, his head slightly bowed, the picture of a beaten-down patriarch sorry for his sins. Brianna was slightly behind them, her face a carefully constructed portrait of sisterly concern, her eyes wide, her posture open and pleading. For 3 seconds, nobody spoke. They let the image sink in. They wanted me to absorb the tableau of the grieving family. Then, Mom took a shaky breath. She took half a step forward, reaching a hand out toward me, but stopping just short of touching me, as if she felt unworthy. Oh, Zara, she choked out. The voice was perfect. It cracked in exactly the right places. We didn't know if you'd open the door, she sniffed. Dad looked up, his eyes meeting mine with a sorrowful heaviness. We miss you, sweetheart, he said. His voice was dropped an octave. It sounded regretful, just like Brianna had told him. Mom let out a small sob. We just miss you so much, please. Can we just come in? We just want to be a family again. It was flawless. If I hadn't been holding my phone in my pocket, if I hadn't watched the last 12 minutes of footage, I might have believed it. I might have stepped back. I might have let them in. I might have offered them tea and let them weave their web around me again. But I had seen the script. I leaned against the doorframe. I did not step back. I did not invite them in. I kept my hand on the doorknob, creating a physical barrier. I looked at Mom. I looked at Dad. And then I looked directly at Brianna. I saw the flicker of confusion in Brianna's eyes. She was reading my face, and she wasn't seeing the guilt she expected. She was seeing something else. Amused detachment. I smiled. It was the smile I had practiced in the mirror. That was good, I said. My voice was calm, conversational. Mom blinked, tears arrested in her eyes. What? The entrance, I said. The tears, the blocking. It was very professional. Zara, what are you talking about? Dad asked, frowning. We came here to... I held up a hand, stopping him mid-sentence. I looked at my mother again. But I have to ask, I said, tilting my head slightly to the side, looking at them with the curiosity of a director reviewing a scene. How many takes did that take? The silence that followed was absolute. It wasn't the silence of an empty house. It was the silence of a vacuum. The air seemed to be sucked out of the porch. Mom's mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. The tragic mask slipped, just a fraction, revealing the confusion underneath. Brianna's eyes narrowed instantly. She knew. She was the smart one. She realized, in that split second, that something was wrong. Her gaze darted to the side of the door frame. She looked at the small, black rectangle mounted on the brick. The blue light on the Ring camera was solid, unblinking. "Excuse me?" Brianna said, her voice losing its soft, sisterly lilt and hardening into something brittle. "The 'we miss you' line," I clarified, looking at Dad. "You nailed the octave drop." Brianna was right. It sounded much more regretful than the first version. I saw the color drain from my father's face. He looked at Brianna, panic rising in his chest. "And Mom," I said, turning my gaze to her. The rubbing of the eyes? Genius. Really sold the sleepless nights look. Although, Brianna, you were a little harsh with the "don't slouch" command. Dad is doing his best. "You," Brianna started, stepping forward. The concern was gone. The predator was back. "You were watching?" "I'm still watching," I said, tapping my pocket where my phone lay against my hip. "And listening. It's amazing what these microphones pick up, isn't it? Even whispers about what was it? Papers? Deadlines? Grandma cutting you out?" My mother gasped. It was a real sound this time. A sharp intake of breath that sounded like she had been slapped. "Zara, that's not..." Mom started, her hands fluttering up. "Save it," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it snapped like a whip. "I have the video. I have the audio. I have the rehearsal. So, you can drop the act. The show is over." I looked at Brianna. Her face had gone from confused to furious in the span of 5 seconds. She looked like she wanted to lunge at me, but she knew the camera was recording. "You think you're smart?" Brianna hissed. "I think I'm tired," I replied. "And I think you 3 are on my porch uninvited." "We are not leaving," Brianna said, crossing her arms again, the defensive posture she had just told Dad to avoid. "We need to talk." "No," I corrected her. "You need something. I don't need anything. That's the difference." I started to close the door. "Wait," Dad shouted, stepping forward and putting his hand on the door, blocking it. "Zara, please, just listen. It's about your grandmother." "I know," I said, pushing back against the door with my shoulder. "I heard. She's changing the papers. Friday. Big scary deadline." "She's sick." "Zara," Mom said, trying a new angle. "She's 80 years old." "She's been 80 all year," I said. "She wasn't important enough to visit last week, or the week before, but now that the money is threatened, suddenly we're doing family reunions?" "It's not just money," Mom cried, tears flowing again, though I couldn't tell if these were real frustration or just take two. "It is always money with you people," I said. "It's never just a visit. It's never just a phone call. There is always a bill attached." "Open the door, Zara," Brianna commanded. She stepped up right next to Dad, her face inches from the crack I had left open. "You are coming to that party. You don't have a choice." I stopped pushing the door for a second. I looked at her, really looked at her. "Or what?" I asked softly. "Or you'll regret it," she said. It wasn't a scream, it was a promise. I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound that surprised even me. "I already regret opening this door," I said. But thanks for the footage. It's going to look great in my archive. I shoved the door hard. Dad, caught off guard by the sudden force, stumbled back. The latch clicked. I turned the deadbolt. Thud. I turned the secondary lock. Click. I stood there in the hallway, my back against the wood, breathing hard. Outside, I could hear them. Unbelievable. That was Brianna. What do we do now? That was Dad. She recorded us. She recorded the whole thing. That was Mom, sounding terrified. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. I opened the app again. I watched them on the screen. They were arguing now. Brianna was pacing back and forth on my welcome mat, gesturing wildly. I turned the volume down. I didn't need to hear them anymore. I had what I needed. But then, I saw Brianna stop pacing. She walked up to the camera. She put her face right up to the lens, her eye filling the screen, distorted and monstrous. She knew I was watching. She mouthed 3 words. See you tomorrow. I stared at the screen. She was right. She wasn't giving up. And if I didn't go, if I let them spin the narrative to Grandma without me there to defend myself, they would win. They would take the one person who actually cared about me and turn her against me. I looked at the saved video file again. 12 minutes. 12 minutes of truth. I wasn't going to hide anymore. I had the weapon. Now, I just had to figure out how to use it. To understand why I stood on that porch with a smile that felt like a loaded weapon. You have to understand the person I was before the silence. You have to go back 9 months. In every dysfunctional family, roles are assigned at birth, stamped onto your forehead like an expiration date. Brianna was the protagonist. She was the one with the big dreams, the big crises, and the fragile ego that required constant reinforcement. I was the narrator. I was the observer. But mostly, I was the safety net. My role was to be low maintenance. I was the child who did not need braces, the teenager who did not crash the car, and the adult who did not ask for help. I took pride in it. That was the trap. I wore my independence like a medal, not realizing it was actually a muzzle. I worked as a shift manager at Blue Hollow Emergency Dispatch. It is a job that requires a very specific kind of personality. You have to be able to listen to the worst moment of someone's life, process the logistics of their survival, and dispatch resources, all while keeping your own heart rate under 80 beats per minute. I was good at it. I was steady. I made $42 an hour, which in St. Louis is enough to live comfortably if you are careful. I was careful, but my family was not. For 6 years, I had been the unofficial bank of the Barnes family. It was never a demand. It was always an emergency. It was always a short-term bridge loan until a paycheck cleared, or a tax refund arrived, or a big break finally happened. I kept a note on my phone. It was password protected, hidden deep in a folder of mundane grocery lists. It was titled simply, The Ledger. I opened it sometimes when I could not sleep, scrolling through the history of my own exploitation. March, 4 years ago. $1,200 for Brianna's car repair. Transmission. July, 3 years ago. $800 for Dad's dental copay. Promised back in 2 weeks. September, 2 years ago. $3,500 for Brianna's lifestyle brand launch inventory. Inventory never sold. The list went on. A digital graveyard of my savings. The total at the bottom of the screen, calculated automatically by the app, was a number that made my stomach churn every time I looked at it. $28,900. That was a down payment on a house. That was a master's degree. That was a trip to Europe. But instead, it was the price of keeping the peace. It was the tuition I paid to be allowed to sit at the Thanksgiving table without being glared at. And the worst part? Not 1 cent of it had ever been paid back. Not one. But the breaking point was not about me. It was about Grandma Lorraine. Grandma was the only person in that lineage who saw me as a human being rather than a resource. She was 80 years old, living alone in the small timber house she had bought with my grandfather in 1972. But time is a thief, and it had been stealing her mobility by the inch. Last winter, she fell in the hallway. She did not break anything, but it terrified her. I saw the fear in her eyes, the sudden realization that her home had become a hazard. I took charge. That is what I did. I called contractors. I got quotes. We needed handrails installed in the long hallway. We needed a ramp for the front porch steps, because her knees could no longer handle the incline. We needed the bathroom retiled with anti-slip surfacing and a walk-in shower installed. The quote came to $8,000. I called a family meeting. I sat Mom, Dad, and Brianna down at the dining table. I presented the spreadsheet. I can put in $3,000 up front, I told them. But I cannot cover the whole thing. We need a fund. If we all contribute, we can get the work done by spring. Mom and Dad looked at their shoes. They were famously liquid poor, living a lifestyle they could not afford to keep up appearances at the country club. I will handle it, Brianna said. She sat up straight, radiating that unearned confidence that always fooled people. I just closed a client for my consulting firm. I have cash flow. Zara, you put in $450 a month. I will match it. Mom and Dad can chip in what they can. We will open a dedicated account. I will manage the contractors. I hesitated. My gut told me no. My gut told me that giving Brianna access to money was like giving a pyromaniac a box of matches. Are you sure? I asked. Brianna rolled her eyes. God. Zara, do you have to be so controlling? I love Grandma too. Let me do something good for once. You always have to be the hero. So I relented. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that when it came to Grandma, the woman who baked us cookies and hid $5 bills in our pockets, Brianna would be decent. For 5 months, I transferred $450 out of my paycheck on the first of every month. The transaction description was always the same. Grandma's Safety Fund. It gave me a sense of peace. I pictured the account growing. I pictured the contractor coming to fix the bathroom. I pictured Grandma walking safely down her hallway. The installation was scheduled for a Tuesday in May. I had taken the day off work to be there, to supervise the crew. On Monday night, I was at my apartment, organizing my paperwork. I realized I needed to buy the specific grab bars Grandma wanted, the brushed nickel ones, to have them ready for the installers. I figured I would just use the debit card for the joint account Brianna and I had set up. I logged into the banking portal. I typed in the password. The page loaded. I stared at the screen. I blinked, assuming the internet connection had glitched, that the numbers had not fully rendered. I refreshed the page. The number remained the same. Available balance, $612.42. I sat there, the blue light of the laptop illuminating my horrified face. There should have been nearly $5,000 in there. My contributions alone totaled $2,250. Brianna was supposed to have matched it. I clicked on transaction history. It was like reading an autopsy report of a murder. There were withdrawals, hundreds of them. Sephora, $212. Ticketmaster, $480. Bistro Romano, $160. ATM, withdrawal, $300. ATM withdrawal, $300. There were no deposits from Brianna, not a single one. She had not only failed to match my contributions, she had been using my money meant to keep our grandmother from falling and breaking a hip, as her personal piggy bank. She had been eating dinners on Grandma's safety. She had been buying concert tickets with Grandma's hips. I felt a coldness spread through my chest that was entirely new. It was not anger. Anger is hot. This was absolute zero. I picked up my phone. I did not text. I called her. She answered on the second ring, sounding cheerful. There was music in the background, the clinking of glasses. Hey, Z, what's up? I am looking at the bank account, I said. My voice was flat. The Grandma Safety Fund. There was a pause, a beat of silence where the background noise seemed to swell. Oh, she said. Her tone shifted instantly from cheerful to dismissive. Yeah, I was meaning to tell you. I had to move some things around. You spent it, I said. I didn't spend it, she scoffed, as if I were stupid. I leveraged it. I had a liquidity issue with the business. It is a revolving loan. Zara, basic economics. I am going to put it back. The contractors are coming tomorrow at 8 in the morning, I said. We have $612. The deposit is $2,000. Well, just reschedule them, she said, her voice dripping with irritation. God, why is everything such a drama with you? Just push it back 3 weeks. I have a check clearing on the 1st. You spent the money for Grandma's ramp on makeup and dinner, I said. I needed to say it out loud. I needed to hear the reality of it. You are being dramatic, she snapped. I am at a networking event right now. I cannot do this with you. I will fix it later. She hung up. I sat there for a moment, the silence of my apartment ringing in my ears. Then, I stood up. I grabbed my keys. I drove to my parents' house. I did not speed. I drove exactly the speed limit. I was operating on the cold logic of a dispatcher handling a 5-car pileup. When I walked into their living room, the television was on. Mom was knitting. Dad was reading a tablet. They looked up, surprised to see me at 9 o'clock on a Monday. Zara? Mom asked. Is everything okay? Brianna stole the money, I said. I did not lead up to it. I did not soften the blow. The money for Grandma's house. It is gone. The account is empty. I held up my phone, showing them the screenshot of the transaction history. Dad squinted at the screen. Mom put down her knitting needles. Stole is a very strong word, Zara, Dad said, frowning. She took money that did not belong to her and spent it on herself, I said. That is the definition of theft. She probably just borrowed it, Mom said, waving her hand dismissively. You know your sister. She gets mixed up with her accounts. She is very creative, not detail-oriented like you. We have contractors coming tomorrow, I said, my voice rising slightly. We cannot pay them. Grandma doesn't get her ramp. Grandma doesn't get her shower because Brianna needed to go to a concert. Well, can't you cover it? Dad asked. He looked at me with genuine expectation. I felt like I had been punched in the throat. Excuse me? You have savings, Dad said, shrugging. You have that steady job. Just pay the contractor, and we will have Brianna pay you back when she gets on her feet. She is going through a hard time right now. Zara, her business is struggling. She is at a bar right now, I said. I heard the glasses clinking. She is networking, Mom defended. She is trying to build a future. Why are you always so hard on her? I looked at them. I really looked at them. For years, I thought they were just oblivious. I thought if I just explained the math, if I just showed them the evidence, they would see the unfairness. I thought they were simply bad at judging character. But in that moment, standing on their plush beige carpet, I realized I was wrong. They knew. They knew exactly who Brianna was. They knew she was a liar. They knew she was selfish. They knew she was a thief. They just didn't care. Because Brianna was the one they had invested their emotional identity in. She was the reflection of their own chaotic, aspirational desires. I was just the mechanic who kept the engine running. I was the utility bill. You don't love the utility bill. You just get annoyed when the price goes up. You are asking me, I said slowly, to pay for the theft. You are asking me to apologize for her stealing from her own grandmother. We are asking you to be a family, Mom said, her voice taking on that icy, disappointed tone that used to make me crumble. We are asking you not to make a scene. Why do you always have to be so selfish? Your sister is drowning, and you are worried about a few dollars. Selfish. I had given them $28,900. I had given them my nights, my weekends, my peace of mind, and I was the selfish one. Something inside me snapped. It wasn't a loud snap. It was the sound of a heavy tether finally being cut. Okay, I said. Okay? Dad asked, looking relieved. So you'll handle the contractor? No, I said. I mean, okay, I understand now. Understand what? Mom asked. I understand that there is no amount of money I can pay to make you love me as much as you love her mistakes. I turned around and walked out. Zara! Zara, come back here, Mom called after me. Don't you walk away from me. I got into my car. I sat in the driver's seat for a long time, staring at the garage door. My hands were shaking, but my mind was crystal clear. I opened the banking app on my phone. I transferred the remaining $612 back into my personal account, the one they didn't have access to. Then I opened the Notes app. I opened the ledger. I scrolled to the bottom. I did not add a new entry. Instead, I typed 2 words at the very end of the list. Account closed. I drove home. I did not sleep that night. I spent the night packing boxes. I spent the night looking for apartments in parts of the city they would never visit. I spent the night changing passwords, changing emails, and blocking numbers. I called the contractor at 6 in the morning and canceled the job. I told him the funding had fallen through. I felt sick doing it, knowing Grandma was the one suffering. But I knew if I paid for it, nothing would ever change. I had to stop the bleeding. That was the night the old Zara died. The Zara who wanted to be good. The Zara who wanted to be thanked. 9 months later, when I opened my door and saw them standing there with their rehearsed tears and their "We miss you" scripts, they were not looking at the daughter they remembered. They were looking at a stranger who knew exactly how much their love cost, and who had decided, finally, that the price was too high. The silence was the loudest thing I had ever heard. For the first week after I left, the absence of noise felt heavy, almost physical, like a weighted blanket I was not used to wearing. I had spent 34 years living in a state of high-frequency static. My nervous system was calibrated to the pitch of my mother's sighs, the thud of my father's pacing, and the shrill, demanding ringtone that Brianna had assigned to herself on my phone. When I finally pressed the red block contact button on all 3 of them, it felt like popping my ears after a long flight. I did not just move out. I disappeared. I rented a U-Haul at 2 in the morning on a Wednesday, so none of the neighbors would see me loading boxes. I drove to a storage unit 3 towns over, dumped the majority of my past life there, and took only what I needed to the duplex. The first thing I did in the new house was change my number. The second thing I did was leave the group chat. We had a family group chat called the Barnes Hive. It was a digital torture chamber where Brianna posted photos of things she wanted. Mom posted guilt-tripping articles about family loyalty, and Dad posted links to get-rich-quick schemes that required initial capital I refused to provide. I opened the chat one last time. I did not type a farewell message. I did not offer an explanation. I simply tapped Exit Group. The screen asked me to confirm. Are you sure you want to leave? I had never been more sure of anything in my life. I pressed yes. The days that followed were strange. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop. I kept checking my phone, my phantom limb, expecting the barrage of texts demanding to know where I was, why I had left, and who was going to pay for the cable bill now. But the screen remained black. The new number was a fortress. No one had the code. For the first time in a decade, I slept. I do not mean I simply closed my eyes and lost consciousness. I mean I slept deeply, dreamlessly, without the rigid tension in my jaw that had cracked 2 molars in the last 5 years. Before the duplex, 11:40 at night was the witching hour. That was when Brianna's crises usually peaked. That was when the text would come. I need you to pick me up, or I am short on rent, or Mom is crying again. Come fix it. My body would naturally spike with cortisol at 11:30, bracing for impact, but in the duplex, 11:40 came and went with nothing but the sound of the wind rattling the old window frames. I would lie in my bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the silence. It was terrifying at first. I felt useless. I felt like a firefighter sitting in a station where the alarm had been cut. But by the 3rd week, the terror faded into a luxury I had never practically known. Rest. I started to build a life that looked like mine. My apartment was small, barely 900 square feet, but every inch of it was paid for with money that was safe in my own account. I did not buy expensive furniture. I went to thrift stores and estate sales. I bought a velvet armchair that smelled like old books. I bought a rug with a pattern of deep, calming blues. I filled the corners with plants. Snake plants, pothos, monsters, living things that required care but did not demand more than I could give. They did not ask for loans. They did not gaslight me. They just drank the water I gave them and grew. The kitchen was the hardest part. In my parents' house, dinner was a battlefield. It was where the interrogations happened. It was where Brianna would pick at her food and critique my life choices while Mom nodded in agreement. In the duplex, I bought a small, round table. It was barely big enough for two. But I only bought one chair. I placed it right by the window. The first night I sat there, eating a bowl of pasta I'd cooked for myself, a wave of sadness hit me so hard I almost dropped my fork. It is a strange thing to mourn a toxicity you voluntarily escaped. I looked at the empty space across from me and felt the ache of being an orphan with living parents. But then, I took a bite of food. It was hot. It was quiet. No one was asking me for $500. No one was telling me I looked tired. No one was asking why I wasn't married yet. The sadness washed out, and a lightness washed in. It was a table for one. Yes, but it was a table of peace. There was only one hole in my fortress. Grandma Lorraine. She did not have a cell phone. She believed they were tracking devices used by the government, a paranoia I used to find funny, but now found tragic because it cut my only line to her. She relied on the landline in her hallway. I tried to call her. I tried every Sunday, just like I used to visit every Sunday, but Brianna was always there. It was uncanny. I would call the landline, and after 3 rings, Brianna's voice would answer. "Hello?" "Hi," I would say, my voice tightening. "It is Zara. Can I speak to Grandma?" "Oh, she is sleeping," Brianna would say, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "She had a rough morning. Her hip is acting up. I shouldn't wake her." "It is 2 in the afternoon," I would argue. "She is old. Zara, old people nap. You would know that if you were here." Click. I called on a Tuesday. Brianna answered. "She is in the bath." I called on a Friday. Brianna answered. "She is watching her show. She gets confused if we pause it." I knew what she was doing. She was gatekeeping. She was isolating the target. If Grandma couldn't hear my voice, Brianna could paint whatever narrative she wanted. She could tell Grandma I had abandoned her. She could tell Grandma I didn't care. I thought about driving over there. I thought about storming the house. But I knew that was exactly what Brianna wanted. She wanted a scene. She wanted me to show up screaming so she could point a finger and say to Grandma, "See? She is unstable." So I stayed away. I wrote letters. I mailed them to Grandma's address, but I suspected they never made it past the mailbox. I suspected they ended up in the trash, unopened, another casualty of Brianna's campaign. It went on like this for months. My peace was real, but it was fragile. It was built on the shaky foundation of avoidance. Then came the text message. It was a Tuesday afternoon in early November. I was at work, reviewing a dispatch log from a 3-alarm fire, when my personal phone buzzed. I looked down. It was a number I did not recognize. My stomach tightened. I usually ignored unknown numbers, assuming it was a creditor my parents had accidentally put my number down for, or perhaps Brianna calling from a burner phone. But something made me open it. The preview showed a long block of text. "Zara, this is Martha Higgins. I live next door to your grandmother. I hope you remember me. I asked your grandmother for your number because she has been asking for you." I froze. Mrs. Higgins, the lady with the hydrangeas and the mean little terrier that barked at tires. I hadn't thought about her in years. I tapped the message to read the rest. She wanted me to tell you that her 80th birthday party is this Saturday. She knows you and your sister are not talking. She told me to tell you that she doesn't care about the fighting. She wants you there. She said, "Tell Zara I have something I need to say, and I need to say it while everyone is in the room." I read the message 3 times. I have something I need to say. That was not a casual invitation. That was a summons. Grandma Lorraine was not a woman of drama. If she wanted to make a speech, it was because she was setting something in stone. I sat back in my office chair. the hum of the dispatch center fading into the background. If I went, I would be walking straight into the trap. Brianna would be there. Mom and Dad would be there. It would be a performance, a circus, and I would be the clown they threw pies at. But if I didn't go, Grandma would speak to a room that didn't include me. Whatever she had to say about the house, the money, the future, would be filtered through Brianna's interpretation. And worse, Grandma would look at the door and see that I hadn't come. She would think I chose my pride over her milestone. I texted Mrs. Higgins back, "Thank you. Mrs. Higgins, did she say anything else?" The reply came 2 minutes later. "She said to tell you to be careful, and she said she misses her girl." I put the phone down and stared at the wall. Be careful. That 2-word warning chilled me more than any threat Brianna could have screamed. Grandma knew. She knew something was happening. She was awake inside the house that Brianna was trying to turn into a prison. I spent the next 48 hours in a state of paralysis. I paced the floors of my quiet duplex. I watered my plants until the soil was mud. I sat at my table for one and felt the silence turn from comforting to oppressive. I wanted to go. I needed to go. But the fear of being pulled back in, the fear of losing the 9 months of sanity I had fought so hard for, was paralyzing. I was standing in my kitchen, holding a mug of tea that had gone cold, trying to build the courage to just get in the car and drive to Grandma's house immediately, to bypass the party and see her on my own terms. That was when my phone buzzed on the counter. Motion detected. Front door. I frowned. It was 7:42 in the evening. I walked over to the phone. I expected to see a delivery driver, or maybe a neighborhood cat triggering the sensor. I unlocked the screen. The Ring app opened, and there they were. The air in my kitchen seemed to drop 10 degrees. They had found me. I had covered my tracks. I had used a P.O. box. I had registered the utilities under my middle name. I had told no one. But Brianna was resourceful when she needed money. She must have found a way. Maybe she hired someone. Maybe she called my old job. Maybe she just drove around the city until she spotted my car. I watched them on the screen, the rehearsal, the acting coaching, the staging of the tears. My first instinct was panic. The old neural pathways lit up like a Christmas tree. Hide. Turn off the lights. Pretend you are not home. Run. I watched my mother rub her eyes to fake the tears. I watched my father practice his sad, regretful slump. I watched Brianna check her reflection, treating my front porch like a backstage dressing room, and suddenly, the panic vanished. It was replaced by a cold, hard curiosity. For 9 months, I had been the one running. I had been the one hiding in the dark, hoping they wouldn't find me. I had given them all the power of the pursuer. But looking at them now, on the small screen of my phone, they didn't look scary. They looked pathetic. They looked like bad actors in a low-budget soap opera. They were not monsters under the bed. They were just desperate people trying to break into a house that didn't belong to them anymore. I listened to Brianna's whisper, "If she doesn't show up, Grandma is going to change the papers." The puzzle pieces clicked into place. Mrs. Higgins' text, the warning to be careful, the sudden, desperate appearance of my family after 9 months of silence. They weren't here to save our relationship. They were here to secure the bag. They needed me as a prop for their performance at the birthday party. I set the mug of cold tea down on the counter. I looked at my reflection in the dark kitchen window. I didn't look like the scared girl who used to pay their bills anymore. I looked like a woman who owned her own home. However rented and small it was, I wasn't going to hide. Hiding would mean I was afraid. Hiding would mean I was guilty. I was neither of those things. I tapped the download button on the app. I wanted the record. Then I walked to the hallway mirror and practiced my smile. Let's see what they do when the prop speaks back. I thought. I walked to the door, my socks sliding silently on the floor, and reached for the handle. I was done with no contact. It was time for full contact. The transformation was instantaneous. It was fascinating, in a morbid, clinical sort of way, like watching a chameleon change colors to match a new threat. The moment the words, How many takes left my mouth? My mother's face went blank. The trembling lip, which had been vibrating with such tragic precision a second ago, went still. The tears, which had been welling in her eyes, seemed to retract back into her tear ducts. It was as if someone had cut the power cord to a weeping machine. She blinked once, hard, and the grieving mother was gone. In her place stood Elaine Barnes, the woman who once told me I shouldn't wear yellow because it made me look like a bruised banana. She looked at me not with sorrow, but with the annoyance of a stage manager whose lead actress had just fallen off the stage. "Zara," she said. Her voice was dry, completely dry. "Don't be difficult." "I am not being difficult," I said, leaning casually against the door frame, keeping my body blocking the entrance. "I am being an audience critic. I thought the performance was a little derivative, but the effort was there." Brianna stepped forward. The sisterly concern had vanished from her face, replaced by a sharp, predatory glare. She jabbed a finger toward the small black device mounted on the brickwork. "You are recording this?" she snapped. "You are recording your own family? That is sick, Zara. That is paranoid behavior." I looked at her finger, then up at her eyes. "This is my house," I said. "That is a security camera. Its job is to record threats. And considering you three just spent 12 minutes plotting how to manipulate me into opening the door, I would say it is doing its job perfectly." "We were not manipulating you," Dad stammered. He was the only one struggling to pivot. He was still stuck in the previous scene, clutching his lines like a lifeline. He looked at me with wide, wet eyes, trying to salvage the emotional beat. "We just wanted to make sure we said the right thing. We were nervous. We miss you, sweetheart." I looked at my father. He looked smaller than I remembered. His coat was buttoned wrong. He looked at me, hoping I would take the bait, hoping I would slide back into the role of the dutiful daughter who smoothed over the awkward edges of his incompetence. "Stop," I said. "What?" He blinked. "Stop acting," I said. "The scene is dead. Dad, the reviews are in. It flopped. Please stop insulting my intelligence by pretending you are here because you miss me. You didn't miss me in February. You didn't miss me in July. You certainly didn't miss me when you were spending my savings at a wine bar." "That is in the past," Brianna cut in, waving her hand as if swatting away a fly. "We are here now. Are you going to invite us in? Or are we going to stand on the porch like solicitors?" "You are standing on the porch," I said. "And you can stay there. If you have something to say it to the wind, or say it to the camera. I am sure the cloud storage would love to hear it." "We need to talk about Grandma," Mom said, her voice dropping to a whisper. She looked around the neighborhood, checking to see if any of the other duplex residents were watching. "This is private family business." "I am listening," I said. "Not out here," Mom hissed. "Then nowhere," I replied. I started to pull the door shut. "Wait!" Brianna lunged forward, jamming her expensive leather boot between the door and the frame. Fine. We will do this your way. We will stand out here in the cold like beggars." "You are not beggars," I corrected her. "Beggars are usually honest about what they need." Brianna let out a sharp breath through her nose. She pulled her foot back, but she didn't step away. She squared her shoulders. "Grandma wants us at her birthday party," Brianna said. "Saturday, the whole family." "I know," I said. "Mrs. Higgins texted me." Brianna's eyes narrowed. "Mrs. Higgins? That nosy old bat? Of course she did." "She told me Grandma wants to see me," I said. "She didn't mention anything about a group audition." "It is not an audition," Brianna said, her voice tight. "It is a show of unity. Grandma is turning 80. She is frail. She is sentimental. She has this idea in her head that the family is broken." "The family is broken," I pointed out. "You broke it. I just stopped trying to glue it back together." "She wants to see us together," Mom interjected, stepping up beside Brianna. "She told us that she is making an announcement at the party, about the estate, about the trust." There it was. The truth. It always came down to the estate. And she said, Mom continued, her voice taking on a pleading edge that felt almost real this time, that she wants to see her family whole before she makes any decisions. She wants a picture. Zara, one nice picture of the four of us, smiling, cutting the cake. Is that too much to ask? For an 80-year-old woman? So you need a prop, I said. You need me to stand there and smile so you can secure the inheritance. We need you to be a sister, Brianna said. For one afternoon, just one afternoon. Can you put aside your petty grudges for 4 hours to make Grandma happy? Petty grudges, I repeated. You stole $28,000 from me. You stole $600 from a safety fund for a woman who can barely walk, and you call that a petty grudge? I told you, I will pay it back, Brianna shouted. Her composure cracked. The neighbors across the street turned on their porch light. Brianna realized she was losing control. She lowered her voice, stepping closer. Her perfume something expensive and floral, wafting into the entryway. Look, Brianna said, her voice low and urgent. You want to be right, or you want Grandma to be happy? If we go in there on Saturday separately, if we go in there cold and distant, she will notice. It will upset her. It might affect her health. Do you want to be the reason she has a stroke at her own party? It was a classic move, weaponized guilt, blaming me for a medical catastrophe that hadn't happened yet. I am going to the party, I said. They all froze. Relief washed over Dad's face. Mom let out a breath she had been holding. Good, Mom said. That is good. We knew you would do the right thing. But, I said, raising a finger, I am not going with you. What? Brianna snapped. I will drive myself, I said. I will arrive when I want. I will leave when I want, and I will not be participating in any staged entrances. I will walk in. I will kiss Grandma. I will eat a slice of cake, and I will sit wherever I choose. No, Brianna said immediately. That doesn't work. Why not? I asked. The goal is for me to be there. I will be there. We need to arrive together, Brianna insisted. We need to pull up in the same car. We need to walk in as a unit. It has to look seamless. We have to look like we have already made up. If you walk in alone, everyone will start whispering. The cousins will talk. Aunt Carol will start asking questions. We need to control the narrative before we even step through the door. I don't care about the narrative, I said. And I don't care about Aunt Carol. Well, I do, Brianna hissed. I have a reputation to maintain, and Mom and Dad have to face these people. We are not going to let you embarrass us by sulking in a corner like a dark cloud. Then I guess I won't come, I said. I started to close the door again. No, Dad shouted, sticking his hand out this time. Zara, please, can't you just ride with us? We will pick you up. 11 in the morning. We can have brunch first. Talk things over. I am not getting in a car with you, I said. That is a non-negotiable. I drive myself, or I don't go. Brianna looked like she wanted to scream. She ran a hand through her perfectly styled hair, messing it up for the first time. She looked at Mom. She looked at Dad. She looked at the Ring camera. Then, her phone buzzed. It wasn't a text vibration. It was a call. A long, sustained vibration that she felt through her coat pocket. She pulled it out. She looked at the screen. Her eyes went wide. She turned her back to me immediately. She walked to the far edge of the porch, near the railing, hunching her shoulders to create a wall of privacy. I have to take this, she muttered to Mom. Now? Mom asked. We are in the middle of... It is him, Brianna hissed. She answered the phone. I stood there, watching her. I could not hear the person on the other end, but I could hear Brianna, and more importantly, I could read her body language. She was terrified. I am handling it, she whispered into the phone. Her voice was shaking. No, don't do that yet. Please. She paused, listening. I know it is Friday, she said. I know. But if you file that now, it blows everything up. I just need until Saturday. Saturday night, She listened again. She gripped the railing of the porch so hard her knuckles turned white. "The deadline was an estimate," she pleaded. "Miles, please, just hold him off. If the bank calls the house, no. They can't. They can't talk to her." Miles, her husband, my brother-in-law. "Okay," Brianna said. "Okay. Just don't answer the email. I will fix it. I promise." She hung up. She stood there for a second, staring out at the dark street, breathing heavily. Then she composed herself. She put the mask back on. She turned back to us. "Everything okay?" Dad asked, oblivious as always. "Fine," Brianna said. "Just work. A client issue." She looked at me. Her eyes were harder now, desperate. "Fine," she said to me. "Drive yourself. But you have to be there by noon, not a minute later, and you have to promise to sit at the main table with us. No sitting with the neighbors, no hiding in the kitchen." "I will think about it," I said. "Zara," Brianna warned, "this isn't a game." "It feels like a game," I said. "Who was that on the phone?" "I told you," she said. "A client?" "You said Miles," I countered. "And you said something about a deadline and a bank." Brianna froze. She hadn't realized I could hear that much. "It is none of your business," she spat. "It is my finances. It has nothing to do with you. If it has to do with Grandma, it has to do with me," I said. "What happens on Friday?" "Brianna?" "Nothing," she said too quickly. "Just a business filing. Look, are you coming or not? Because I don't have time for this interrogation." "I will be there," I said. "Noon, my car, my terms." "Fine," Brianna said. She turned to Mom and Dad. "Let's go. We are done here." She marched down the steps without looking back. She didn't say goodbye. She didn't say she missed me. She just walked to her white SUV parked at the curb, her heels clicking aggressively on the concrete. Mom looked at me. She looked like she wanted to say something, maybe something real, but she looked at Brianna's retreating back, and the fear won out. "Please wear something nice," Mom said. "Blue looks good on you, not black. Don't wear black." "Goodbye, Mom," I said. Dad just sighed. He looked at the ring camera one last time, gave it a small, sad wave, as if he were waving to a television audience, and followed them. I watched them get into the car. I watched the brake lights flare red in the darkness. I watched them drive away. I stood on the porch for a long time after they were gone. The cold air bit at my bare arms. But I didn't feel it. If you file that now, it blows everything up. If the bank calls the house, they can't talk to her. My sister wasn't just managing an inheritance. She was managing a disaster. "Deadline," I whispered to the empty street. I turned and went back inside. I locked the deadbolt. I checked the Ring app to make sure the footage of the phone call was saved. It was every desperate whisper. I had my ticket to the party, and I had a feeling I wasn't just going as a guest. I was going as a witness. I sat at my kitchen table, the silence of the house settling back around me like dust after a demolition. My phone lay on the placemat, the screen dark, but the digital weight of what it held felt heavy enough to crack the wood. I had the video. I had the audio of Brianna's panic. I had the timeline. But in the world of high-stakes family drama, intuition is not evidence. Intuition is just a feeling, and my family was expert at gaslighting feelings until they disappeared. If I walked into that party on Saturday with nothing but accusations and a grainy video of a porch rehearsal, Brianna would spin it. She would call me paranoid. She would say they were just nervous because they loved me so much. She would say the phone call about the deadline was about a client, just as she had claimed. I needed concrete to pour over the foundation of my suspicion. I picked up the phone and dialed the one number in my contacts list that did not belong to a person who wanted to borrow money. Audrey Shaw. Technically, Audrey was my father's second cousin, but in spirit, she was the only adult in the Barnes family tree. She was a family law attorney who wore sharp blazers, smoked slim cigarettes despite her doctor's warnings, and had a voice like gravel crunching under a luxury sedan. She was the one person Brianna was genuinely afraid of, because Audrey did not speak in emotions. She spoke in statutes and liabilities. She answered on the first ring. "Zara," she said. "No pleasantries. No, how are you? Just my name." Spoken with a mixture of surprise and alertness. "I was just thinking about you. Are you safe?" "I am safe," I said. "But I had visitors." "Let me guess," Audrey said, the sound of a lighter clicking in the background. "The traveling circus came to town. Did they bring the tears?" "They brought a script," I corrected. "I have it on camera. Audrey, they rehearsed the apology on my porch. Brianna was directing Mom on how to smudge her mascara." Audrey let out a low, dry chuckle. "Of course she did. That girl treats life like a Vanity Fair photo shoot. Did you let them in?" "No," I said. "But I heard things. Brianna took a phone call. She thought she was out of earshot. But my camera picked it up. She was talking to Miles. She was talking about a deadline, a bank, and Friday." The line went silent. I could hear Audrey exhale a long stream of smoke. The humor evaporated from the call. "Friday," Audrey repeated. It wasn't a question. It was a confirmation. "What is happening on Friday?" "Audrey?" I asked. "Brianna said if they don't get me to the party, Grandma is going to change the papers. She said something about a trust." Audrey didn't answer immediately. I heard the rustle of paper. "Zara, you know I can't violate attorney-client privilege," she said slowly. "Your grandmother is my client." "I know," I said. "But Brianna is talking about legal filings. She is panicked. She said, if the bank calls the house, they can't talk to her. That sounds like fraud." "Audrey, if Brianna is worried about the bank calling the house," Audrey said, choosing her words with lethal precision, "then it is possible that Brianna has done something that the bank thinks your grandmother authorized." I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. "Did Grandma authorize it?" I asked. "Lorraine barely authorizes me to buy her a new toaster without a 3-week deliberation," Audrey said. "Lorraine is risk-averse. She has her house. She has her small savings. She has the trust your grandfather set up, which is locked down tight. So why is Brianna freaking out?" "Because," Audrey said, "Lorraine asked me to come over last week. She wanted to review the estate plan. The current plan, the one drafted 10 years ago, splits the assets evenly between your father and his sister, with the remainder going to the grandchildren upon her passing." "Okay," I said. "That sounds standard." "It was," Audrey said. "But Lorraine has been asking questions. She has been asking why the repair fund she set up with Brianna is always empty. She has been asking why she gets late notices for bills that Brianna is supposed to be paying for her." "She knows," I whispered. "She suspects," Audrey corrected. "Lorraine is old, but she is not senile. She feels the draft in the room. She told me she wants to make a change. She wants to announce the new structure of the trust at her birthday party. She wants to look everyone in the eye when she does it. And Brianna knows this?" "Brianna senses it," Audrey said. "Predators always know when the wind changes. If Brianna is talking about a deadline on Friday, my guess is she has a loan or a leverage position that is coming due, or perhaps she is trying to push through a document before Lorraine changes the power of attorney. She needs me there to play happy family," I realized aloud. "She thinks if we look united, Grandma will hesitate. She thinks if she can show Grandma that the conflict is resolved, Grandma won't lock down the money." "Precisely," Audrey said. "Brianna trades in optics. She thinks reality can be edited like a photo. If you show up and smile, she thinks she buys herself another 6 months of access to the checkbook." "I am going to the party," I said. "Good," Audrey said. "I will be there too. I am bringing the new paperwork. And Zara?" "Yes?" "Don't bring a knife to a gunfight," she said. "If you are going to walk into that room, bring ammunition, real ammunition, because if Brianna feels cornered, she will not just lie. She will destroy your character to save her own skin." "I know," I said. "She already tried." "Gather everything," Audrey advised. every text, every email, every bank transfer. If she tries to paint you as the villain, you need to be able to paint the truth without saying a word. We hung up. I sat there for a moment, letting the gravity of it settle. It wasn't just about the $600 anymore. It wasn't even about the $28,000. It was about Grandma Lorraine. Brianna wasn't just stealing. She was potentially putting a lien on the only home our grandmother had ever known. I stood up and walked to my laptop. I had archived the Barnes Hive chat 9 months ago, but I hadn't deleted it. I couldn't. It was like keeping the biopsy results of a tumor. You don't want to look at it, but you need to keep it for the record. I opened the file. The transcript was thousands of pages long, years of daily chatter. I pressed Control F. I typed in the word, money, 412 results. I started scrolling backwards. I was looking for the moment the dynamic shifted. I was looking for the moment they decided I was the mark. I found a conversation from 2 years ago. It was dated 3 days after I had loaned Brianna $3,500 for her failed inventory launch. Brianna: got the cash from Z? Crisis averted. Mom: oh, thank goodness. Did she give you a hard time? Brianna: a little. She did the whole, this is my savings speech, but I just cried a little about how hard I'm trying. She folded. Dad: good. We need that inventory. Brianna: don't worry. She won't ask for it back. She's too afraid of being called selfish. It is her trigger button. I stared at the screen. It is her trigger button. They had weaponized my own conscience. They had sat around, analyzed my psychology, identified my deepest insecurity, the fear of being a bad person, and turned it into an ATM PIN code. I felt a hot tear slide down my cheek, but I wiped it away angrily. This was not the time to be sad. This was the time to be a stenographer. I took a screenshot. I scrolled further. Dad: Zara is asking about the repayment plan again. Brianna: ignore her for 2 days. She will feel guilty for nagging and drop it. She always does. She is weak like that. Mom: just tell her we are family. She can't argue with family. She is weak like that. I screenshotted that one too. I went to my banking app. I downloaded the statements from the last 6 years. I highlighted every transfer to Brianna, to Mom, to Dad. I created a spreadsheet. Date, amount. Reason given, reason suspected. May 12th, $450. Grandma Safety Fund. Status, stolen. June 1st, $450. Grandma Safety Fund. Status, stolen. I worked for 3 hours. The folder on my desktop grew. I named it simply, The Truth, Inside. There were 3 subfolders. Folder 1, The Rehearsal, The Ring Video. Folder 2, The Confession, The Screenshots. Folder 3, The Theft, The Bank Statements. It was a dossier. It was a legal brief. It was the story of my life told in numbers and pixels. I looked at the folder. It looked innocuous, just a little blue icon on a digital desktop, but it was nuclear. I realized then that I wasn't doing this for revenge. Revenge is emotional. Revenge is about making someone hurt because you are hurting. This was about survival. If I went to that party, Brianna would try to kill me socially. She would tell the aunts and cousins that I was unstable, that I was cruel, that I had abandoned the family. She would use my 9 months of silence as proof of my coldness. She would twist the narrative until I was the villain and she was the martyr who just wanted to save Grandma's house. She would do it to protect her lie. And if I stood there and argued, if I screamed and cried and said, "That is not true," I would look exactly like the crazy person she painted me to be. I couldn't win with words. Words were Brianna's currency. She could inflate them and devalue them at will. I needed hard data. I transferred the folder to my phone. I backed it up to a secure cloud drive. I even put a copy on a USB drive and attached it to my keychain. I walked to the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face. I looked at the woman in the mirror. "You are not weak," I told her. "You are just finished." I wasn't going to the party to start a war. I was going to sit there. I was going to eat cake. I was going to smile at Grandma. But if Brianna tried to corner me, if she tried to lie about where the money went, if she tried to tell the room that I was the selfish one, I touched the phone in my pocket. I wouldn't have to shout. I would just have to press play. I turned off the bathroom light. I went to bed. For the first time in 9 months. I didn't just sleep. I slept like a soldier the night before the battle. My sword sharpened and resting by the bedside. I was ready for Saturday. Saturday arrived with a sky the color of bruised slate, threatening rain but never quite delivering it. It was the kind of weather that made everything look slightly gray, no matter how many filters you put over the camera lens. I drove my own car, a reliable 4-year-old sedan that I had paid off 3 months ago. I did not speed. I did not listen to music. I drove in silence, rehearsing my internal monologue, keeping my heart rate steady. I arrived at Grandma Lorraine's house at exactly noon. Not 1 minute early, not 1 minute late. The house was a sprawling, single-story timber cottage on the edge of the suburbs, where the manicured lawns gave way to older, wilder oak trees. It was the house where I had spent my summers, the house that smelled of baking bread and wood polish. But today, it did not look like a home. It looked like a film set. Brianna had been busy. She had strung hundreds of Edison bulbs through the oak trees, creating a canopy of artificial warmth. There were white tents set up on the lawn, tables draped in heavy linen, and a catering crew moving with military precision. I parked my car at the end of the long gravel driveway, which was already jammed with vehicles. I counted 25 cars. This was not the intimate family gathering Mrs. Higgins had hinted at. This was a gala. This was a crowd. I stepped out of the car. I had followed Mom's request, but on my own terms. I was wearing a dress of deep, midnight blue, structured, sharp, and professional. It was not the soft, pastel baby blue Mom probably envisioned. It was the color of a bruise that has healed. It was armor. I walked up the driveway. My heels crunched on the gravel. As I rounded the corner of the house and the backyard came into view, I stopped for a fraction of a second. The yard was packed. There were aunts I hadn't seen in 5 years. There were cousins who lived in Chicago. There were neighbors. There were people I didn't even recognize. Probably business associates Brianna was trying to impress. Brianna was standing near the patio steps, holding a clipboard. She looked immaculate in a cream-colored silk suit that screamed success. She was directing the photographer, a young man with a massive lens, pointing him toward the cake table. Then, she saw me. She didn't wave. She tapped Mom on the shoulder. Mom turned. Dad turned. The 3 of them froze. And then, like a ripple effect, the rest of the party noticed their distraction. The chatter died down. The clinking of silverware on china stopped. Heads turned, eyes narrowed. For a moment, the only sound was the wind in the oak trees and the hum of the catering refrigerator. They were looking at the prodigal daughter, the one who ran away, the one who, according to whatever story Brianna had spun, was probably mentally unstable or heartlessly cruel. I did not look down. I did not fidget. I walked straight toward them. Brianna recovered first. Of course she did. She plastered a smile on her face, a bright, dazzling thing that didn't reach her eyes, and walked toward me with her arms open. "Zara!" she called out, loud enough for the back row to hear. "You made it!" She reached me and pulled me into a hug. Her body was stiff. She smelled of expensive perfume and stress sweat. "I told you noon," she hissed in my ear, her voice dropping to a register only I could hear. "You are cutting it close." She pulled back, keeping her hands on my shoulders, holding me in place like a prop she was positioning. She looked into my face with an expression of exaggerated, pitying concern. "How are you?" she asked, her voice dripping with syrup. "Are you feeling better? We were so worried you wouldn't be up for a crowd today, given everything." It was a masterstroke. In 2 sentences, she had implied to everyone within earshot that I had been sick, that I was fragile, and that my presence was an act of charity on her part. I looked at her. I saw the tightness in her jaw. I saw the way her eyes darted to the pocket of my dress, checking for a phone, checking for a recording device. "I am fine, Brianna," I said. My voice was clear, calm. "I have never been better. The fresh air has been good for me." "Well, you look rested," she said, the compliment sounding like an insult. "Come, say hello to Mom and Dad." Mom and Dad were standing a few feet away, looking like deer caught in headlights. Mom smiled nervously. Dad nodded. They didn't hug me. They seemed afraid to touch me, as if my newfound independence was contagious. "Hi, honey," Mom said weakly. "Glad you came." "Where is Grandma?" I asked. "She is inside resting before the big entrance," Brianna said quickly. "We are going to bring her out in 10 minutes. I have a whole procession planned. You can stand over there, by the punch bowl, with Cousin Greg." She pointed to the far edge of the patio, to the shadowy corner where the socially awkward relatives were huddled. It was the exile table. It was the place you put the people you wanted to hide from the photos. "I don't think so," I said. "Zara, don't start," Brianna warned, her smile never faltering. "The seating chart is done." Before I could answer, the screen door of the cottage creaked open. It wasn't a loud sound, but it cut through the tension. Grandma Lorraine stood in the doorway. She was using her walker, the one with the tennis balls on the feet, but she stood upright. She was wearing her favorite floral dress, the one with the violets, and her silver hair was curled perfectly. She wasn't supposed to be out yet. Brianna's schedule had her appearing in 10 minutes. "Grandma," Brianna chirped, rushing forward. "You are early. The music isn't cued yet. Let me help you back inside so we can do the announcement properly." Grandma ignored her. She looked past Brianna. She looked past Mom and Dad. She looked past the 50 guests holding champagne flutes. Her eyes locked on mine. "Zara," she said. Her voice was thin, aged by 80 winters, but it carried across the patio. I walked past Brianna. I walked past my parents. I walked up the 3 wooden steps to the porch. Grandma Lorraine let go of her walker with one hand and reached out. I took her hand. It felt fragile, like dry parchment paper over bird bones, but her grip was surprisingly strong. She pulled me down. I bent my knees so we were eye level. "You came," she whispered. "I promised," I said. "I was afraid they scared you off," she said. "They tried," I replied. She looked at me for a long moment, searching my face. She was looking for the granddaughter she knew, the one who used to read to her on rainy afternoons. She smiled. It was a real smile. The first honest thing I had seen all day. Then, she straightened up. She looked at the crowd. "Well," she announced, "I am here now. Let's eat." "Okay." Brianna clapped her hands, trying to regain control of the room. "Everyone, please find your seats. Grandma, let me help you to the head table. I have you sitting between me and Miles, so we can help you with your plate." "No," Grandma said. Brianna stopped mid-step. "What?" "I changed my mind," Grandma said. She pointed a shaking finger at the long table in the center of the patio, the one with the largest centerpiece. "I want Zara next to me." The silence returned. Brianna's smile twitched. "Grandma, the place cards are already set. Zara is sitting with Greg. It is all arranged." "Move the card," Grandma said. It was a command. Simple, absolute. Brianna looked at Mom. Mom looked at the ground. Brianna looked at the guests, realizing that arguing with an 80-year-old birthday girl in front of an audience was a bad look. "Of course," Brianna said, her voice tight enough to snap a violin string. "Whatever you want. Grandma, Zara, why don't you grab a chair?" Grandma didn't wait. She shuffled forward, her walker thumping rhythmically on the decking. I walked beside her, my hand hovering near her elbow in case she stumbled. We reached the head table. Brianna had clearly designed this table as a throne for herself. It was center stage. I pulled out the chair to Grandma's right. Grandma sat down with a sigh of relief. I sat next to her, across the table. Brianna sat down. Her knuckles were white as she gripped the stem of her wine glass. She was smiling, but her eyes were drilling holes into my forehead. I looked around the table. To my left was Audrey Shaw. Audrey was wearing a sharp gray blazer and sipping a glass of iced tea. She didn't look at me directly. She was looking at the centerpiece, but as I sat down, she gave a microscopic nod. "Calm," she murmured, barely moving her lips. "Observe." I took a deep breath. I unfolded my napkin. The lunch began. It was a surreal experience. The food was delicious. Catered salmon, roasted asparagus, potatoes au gratin. But it tasted like ash in my mouth. I was hyper-aware of every movement. Every few minutes, a relative would come up to the table to wish Grandma a happy birthday. "Happy birthday, Lorraine! You look wonderful!" And then they would look at me. "Zara, good to see you out and about." "Zara, we heard you took some time off. Hope you are finding your footing." The passive aggressiveness was suffocating. Brianna had clearly done a thorough job of poisoning the well. They looked at me like I was a recovering addict or a mental patient on day release. I just smiled. "Thank you. I am doing very well." Brianna dominated the conversation at the table. She talked about her consulting firm. She talked about the market. She talked about how hard it was to manage family assets in this economy. "It is a full-time job," she sighed, looking meaningfully at Grandma. "But someone has to do it. You can't just leave these things to chance, or to people who don't understand finance." She shot a glance at me. I didn't bite. I cut my salmon. "How is the dispatch center?" "Zara?" she asked loudly. "Still answering 911 calls? It must be so stressful. I don't know how you handle that kind of pressure without cracking." "I am good at emergencies," I said, looking her dead in the eye. "I know how to spot a crisis before it burns the house down." Brianna's eye twitched. Next to her husband Miles was silent. He looked terrible. His skin was gray, and he was drinking scotch, which wasn't even on the menu. He kept checking his watch. He looked like a man waiting for an execution. The meal dragged on. The sun began to dip lower, casting long, golden shadows across the lawn. Then, the waiters began to clear the plates. "Dessert is coming," Brianna announced. And then the speeches. Grandma leaned toward me, under the tablecloth. I felt her hand press something into mine. I froze. It was small, paper, a rectangle. "Take it," she whispered. Her lips barely moved. She was looking straight ahead at the garden, smiling at a neighbor. I closed my hand around it. It was a thin envelope. "Put it in your purse," she murmured. "Do not open it. Not yet." "Grandma?" I whispered back. "Wait for the cake," she said. "Wait until she starts talking about the future. That is when you will need it." She gave my hand a squeeze, sharp, urgent, and then pulled away. I slipped the envelope into my purse, my heart hammering against my ribs. I looked across the table. Brianna was busy signaling the photographer to get ready for the toasts. She hadn't seen it, but Audrey had. Audrey took a sip of her tea. She caught my eye. She didn't smile. She just raised one eyebrow, a silent acknowledgement that the game had officially begun. I touched the leather of my purse. The envelope felt hot, like it was radioactive. Brianna stood up. She tapped a spoon against her glass. Clink, clink, clink. "Everyone!" she called out, her voice projecting with practiced charisma. "If I could have your attention, please." The crowd hushed. "We are here to celebrate 80 wonderful years of Lorraine Barnes," Brianna said. "But we are also here to celebrate family and the future." She looked down at Grandma with a smile that looked like a bear trap waiting to snap shut. "Grandma has been thinking a lot about her legacy," Brianna said. "And today, she wanted to share that legacy with all of you." I sat back in my chair. My hand rested on my purse. "Go ahead." "Brianna," I thought, "start the show." The applause that followed Brianna's opening toast was polite, scattered, and mercifully short. She had promised a video presentation in 20 minutes, a montage of Grandma's life that I suspected was 80% photos of Brianna and 20% photos of everyone else, and the guests had returned to their conversations. The air on the patio felt suddenly thin. It was a physical sensation, a tightening of the chest that had nothing to do with the humidity and everything to do with the proximity to so many lies. I looked at my plate. The half-eaten salmon looked gray. I looked at Brianna, who was now moving table to table, touching shoulders, laughing too loudly, playing the role of the benevolent hostess. I needed out. Just for a moment, I leaned over to Grandma. She was sipping her iced tea, her eyes fixed on the garden, looking serene and completely detached from the circus around her. "I am going to get some air," I whispered. "I will be right back." Grandma didn't turn her head, but she gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. "Check the hydrangeas," she murmured. "They look thirsty." It was code. It meant go, but keep your eyes open. I stood up, smoothing the front of my midnight blue dress. I navigated the maze of tables, offering tight smiles to the relatives who tried to catch my eye, and slipped around the side of the house toward the garage. The noise of the party faded as soon as I rounded the corner. The chatter, the clinking silverware, the jazz playlist Brianna had curated, it all became a dull hum, muffled by the thick oak siding of the old cottage. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the scent of pine needles and damp earth. I walked toward the detached garage, a structure that had been my grandfather's sanctuary. I intended to just stand there, count to 10, and regain the composure that Brianna was slowly chipping away. But I wasn't alone. The garage was set back from the house, shielded by a row of overgrown azalea bushes. As I approached, I heard the crunch of gravel, not the rhythmic crunch of a guest walking, but the erratic, shifting sound of someone pacing. I stopped. I stepped behind the trunk of a large oak tree, my body instinctively pressing against the rough bark. Voices. "I told you not to come here," a female voice hissed. It was low, venomous, and familiar. Brianna. "I didn't have a choice. Mrs. Barnes," a male voice replied. It was flat, professional, and entirely unwelcome. "You stopped answering your emails." I peered around the edge of the tree. Brianna was standing near the side door of the garage, a spot that was invisible from the patio but perfectly clear from where I stood. She was not wearing her party smile. Her face was twisted into a mask of pure panic. Standing opposite her was a man I did not recognize. He was not a guest. He was wearing a cheap, ill-fitting gray suit and scuffed black shoes. He held a manila envelope in one hand and a clipboard in the other. He looked like bad news wrapped in polyester. "I told you," Brianna said, her voice shaking with a mixture of rage and fear. "It is the weekend. Banks are closed. I can't wire anything until Monday." "The deadline was yesterday at 5 o'clock in the afternoon," the man said. He checked a watch on his wrist. "We have been lenient, but the underwriters are done waiting. The collateral assessment came back flagged." "Flagged?" Brianna's voice pitched up. She looked around wildly, checking the corners of the house. I pulled my head back, heart hammering against my ribs. "What do you mean, flagged?" "I mean the signature doesn't match the previous filings," the man said, "and the title search shows a discrepancy in the trust status. They are initiating the default protocol." "No," Brianna whispered. It was a sound of absolute horror. "You can't. If you file a default notice, it becomes public record. She will see it." "That is not my problem," the man said. He reached into the manila envelope and pulled out a folded document. "I am just here to serve the notice. You have until Friday to cure the default or the proceedings begin, and this time they will be serving the owner of record directly." The owner of record. Grandma. "Give me that." Brianna snatched the paper from his hand. She didn't read it. She crumpled it slightly in her fist, as if she could crush the reality of it into dust. "If you go near her, if you say one word to her, I will sue you for harassment." "We are past harassment," the man said, turning to walk away toward a car parked illegally on the grass service road. "We are at fraud. Mrs. Barnes, fix it by Friday, or get a criminal attorney." He got into his car and drove away. The tires spun silently on the wet grass. Brianna stood there for a long time. She looked at the paper in her hand. Then, with a jerky, violent motion. She shoved it deep into the pocket of her cream blazer. She ran both hands over her face, dragging her skin down, looking like a melting wax figure. She took a deep breath. She adjusted her blazer. She fixed her hair, and then she turned and walked back toward the party. I stayed behind the tree for a full minute after she was gone. My legs felt weak. Fraud. Cure the default. Criminal attorney. This wasn't about an inheritance. This wasn't about Brianna wanting the house after Grandma died. This was about Brianna having already leveraged the house while Grandma was still alive. She wasn't trying to secure a future asset. She was trying to cover up a present crime. The deadline she had mentioned on the porch, the Friday deadline, wasn't about Grandma changing her will. It was about the bank seizing the property. I felt sick, physically sick. I needed water. I couldn't go back to the patio yet. Brianna would be there, scanning the crowd, looking for cracks in the facade. I needed to go inside the house. I circled around to the kitchen door, the one that led into the mudroom. I opened it quietly. The house was cool and dark, a stark contrast to the humidity outside. The kitchen was empty of caterers for the moment. They were all outside clearing the main course, but the room wasn't silent. Sitting at the small breakfast table in the corner, slumped over a glass of amber liquid, was Miles. Brianna's husband looked like he had aged 10 years since lunch. His tie was loosened, hanging askew around his neck. His eyes were red-rimmed and glassy. He was staring at his phone, which lay face up on the table. He didn't hear me come in. The rubber soles of my shoes were silent on the linoleum. He picked up the phone. He didn't dial. The line was already open. He had been on hold, or perhaps just working up the courage to speak. "I can't do it," he whispered into the phone. His voice was thick, slurred, but the desperation cut through the alcohol. "I can't sit there and eat her cake. Man, it is making me sick." He took a gulp of the drink. Scotch. Neat. "No, you don't understand," Miles said, his voice rising slightly. He ran a hand through his thinning hair. "Brianna said it was a bridge loan. She said she just needed to show assets to get the business line of credit. She said Lorraine would never know." I stood frozen in the doorway of the mudroom. I stopped breathing. "But she forged it," Miles said. The word hung in the air like a guillotine blade. "She traced the signature from an old birthday card. I saw her practicing it, and now the bank is calling. And she is out there trying to get the old lady to sign a power of attorney so she can retroactively approve the loan." My hand flew to my mouth to stifle a gasp. That was the plan. Brianna had forged Grandma's signature to get a loan against the house, probably to float her failing business or her lavish lifestyle. Now the bank had flagged the signature. The deadline was the bank threatening to expose the fraud, the party, the unity, the desperate need for me to be there. It was all a setup to soften Grandma up. Brianna needed Grandma to sign a document, likely disguised as something else, or part of a larger stack of estate papers, that would grant Brianna power of attorney. Once she had that, she could legally validate the fraudulent loan she had already taken out. She could make the crime disappear by making it retroactively authorized. And if I wasn't there, if the family looked broken, Grandma might hesitate. Grandma might not sign. And if Grandma didn't sign by Friday, Brianna goes to jail. "I have to tell her," Miles mumbled into the phone. He sounded on the verge of tears. "I have to tell Lorraine, before she signs anything today." He listened to the voice on the other end. "I know she is my wife," Miles shouted, then immediately lowered his voice, looking fearfully toward the patio door. "I know, but this is a felony. If they investigate, they will see my name on the witness line. She made me sign as the witness." He dropped his head into his hands. "God help me." I backed away. I moved backward, inch by inch, until I was back in the mudroom. I turned and quietly opened the door. Slipping back out into the humid afternoon air, I walked until I was behind the garage again. I leaned against the siding and exhaled. The pieces of the puzzle slammed together. The $600 stolen from the repair fund? That wasn't just greed. That was desperation. She was robbing Peter to pay Paul, and now she had robbed Grandma to pay the bank. I reached into my purse. My fingers brushed against the thin envelope Grandma had given me. "Wait for the cake," she had said. "Wait until she starts talking about the future." Grandma knew. She might not know the specifics. She might not know about the man in the cheap suit or the forged signature, but she knew she was being hunted. The envelope in my purse wasn't just a birthday card. It was a shield. Or maybe it was a sword. I looked at the house. The party was in full swing. I could hear laughter. I could hear the clink of glasses. It sounded like a celebration. But it was a crime scene. I had a choice. I could run in there right now. I could scream. I could drag Miles out by his collar and force him to confess in front of everyone. I could pull the crumpled paper out of Brianna's pocket. But that would be messy. That would be chaotic. Brianna would scream. She would cry. She would claim I was lying, that Miles was drunk, that the man was a confused delivery driver. She would create a fog of war, and in that fog, she might still escape. No, I needed to be colder than that. Grandma had a plan. She had given me the envelope for a reason. She had asked me to wait. I checked my phone. I opened the truth folder. I created a new note. Witness: Miles Barnes. Confession: forgery of signature on loan documents. Witnessed by Zara Barnes at 1:45 p.m. in kitchen. I saved it. I straightened my dress. I checked my reflection in the darkened window of the garage. I didn't look like a victim anymore. I looked like a prosecutor. I walked back toward the party. As I stepped onto the patio, Brianna was standing at the head table, holding a microphone. She looked radiant. She looked triumphant. She looked like a woman who thought she had gotten away with it. "And now," Brianna announced, her voice booming over the speakers, "before we cut the cake, I want to say a few words about what this home means to us and how we are going to protect it for generations to come." She smiled at Grandma. It was the smile of a wolf looking at a lamb. I walked to the table. I sat down next to Grandma. Grandma looked at me. Her eyes were sharp, intelligent, and terrifyingly calm. "Did you check the hydrangeas?" she asked softly. "I did," I whispered. "There are weeds in the garden." "Grandma, deep roots?" Grandma nodded. She patted my hand. "Then we shall have to pull them out," she said. I looked at Brianna. She was pulling a stack of papers out of a leather folder. "So," Brianna said to the crowd, "I have prepared a little surprise." I sat back. I crossed my legs. I felt the envelope in my purse. "Proceed." "Brianna." I thought, "Dig the hole. Make it deep." The sun had dipped below the tree line, casting long, stretching shadows across the patio that made the guests look like distorted figures in a painting. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume, stale champagne, and the ozone smell of an approaching storm. Grandma Lorraine placed her hands on the edge of the table. Her knuckles were swollen with arthritis, but her grip was steady. She pushed herself up slowly. She picked up her water glass and tapped it with a spoon. Clink, clink, clink. The sound was small, but it cut through the murmurs of the crowd like a knife. The guests quieted down, turning their faces toward the head table. They were expecting a thank you speech. They were expecting a sweet, rambling anecdote about the passage of time. Grandma opened her mouth to speak, but she never got the first word out. "Oh, Grandma, sit down, please." Brianna's voice rang out, shrill and overly cheerful. She literally leaped from her chair, rushing to Grandma's side and placing a hand on the microphone stand, effectively body-blocking our grandmother from the audience. "You look tired," Brianna cooed, her voice amplified by the speakers so that it boomed across the lawn. "Let me say a few words first. We don't want you straining yourself." Grandma looked at Brianna. Her expression didn't change. She didn't resist. She simply sat back down. Her eyes hard and unblinking, she folded her hands in her lap and waited. Brianna gripped the microphone stand like it was a scepter. She beamed at the crowd, flashing her teeth in a smile that was all gums and panic. "Family," Brianna began, her voice trembling slightly before finding its footing in the practiced cadence of a salesperson. "Family is the most important thing we have. We all know that, and the Barnes family well. We have always been about sticking together." She gestured broadly to the tables. We have been through a lot this year, Brianna continued, her eyes scanning the crowd, daring anyone to disagree. But we are stronger for it, and I am so happy to see my little sister, Zara, here with us today. She turned to me. The spotlight of her attention felt physical, like a heat lamp. Come here, Z, she said, gesturing for me to stand up. I didn't move. I stayed seated, my back straight against the chair. Brianna laughed nervously, playing it off. Oh, she is shy. You all know Zara. She has been going through a really challenging time lately. She lowered her voice to a sympathetic whisper, leaning into the mic. She has been under so much stress, Brianna said, painting a picture of me as a fragile, broken bird. There have been some misunderstandings, some heightened emotions. When you are struggling with your mental health, sometimes you push the people who love you the most away. We all understand that, don't we? She looked at Mom and Dad for backup. Mom immediately nodded, her face arranging itself into a mask of tragic support. Yes, Mom said, loud enough for the nearby tables to hear. We are just so glad she is stable enough to be here. Exactly, Dad chimed in, taking a swig of his wine. She is just sensitive, always has been. I felt the blood boil in my veins. It was a masterclass in narrative control. They were pre-bunking the truth. They were framing me as unstable, emotional, and sensitive before I had even opened my mouth. If I stood up now and accused them of theft, everyone would just shake their heads and say, Poor Zara. There she goes again. Brianna was right. She is having an episode. Brianna smiled at me, a look of triumphant pity. We love you, Zara, she said into the microphone, and we forgive you for the distance. Today is about healing. It is about moving forward. It is about ensuring that this home, this legacy, stays in the hands of the people who can protect it. She reached into her blazer pocket, the same pocket where she had shoved the default notice from the process server. She pulled out a folded document. And that is why, Brianna said, her voice rising to a crescendo, Grandma and I have been talking to protect the estate, to make sure everyone is taken care of. We have prepared a power of attorney that will allow us to manage the difficult financial burden so Grandma can just relax. She placed the paper on the table in front of Grandma. She pulled a pen from her pocket. All we need is a signature, Grandma, Brianna said, smiling so hard her face looked like it might crack. Right here, in front of everyone who loves you. Let's make it official. Let's secure the future. The crowd applauded politely. They thought they were watching a responsible granddaughter stepping up to help. They didn't know they were watching a crime in progress. Brianna uncapped the pen. She held it out to Grandma. Here you go, she urged. Grandma Lorraine looked at the pen. Then she looked at the paper. Then she looked up at Brianna. She didn't take the pen. Instead, she reached out and took the microphone from the stand. She didn't ask for it. She just took it. Brianna, Grandma said. Her voice was not weak. It was low, gravelly, and commanded absolute obedience. Sit down. The applause died instantly. A few people coughed. But Grandma, the signature, Brianna started. Sit down. Grandma didn't shout. She enunciated. Every consonant was a brick wall. Brianna froze. She looked at the crowd. She looked at the paper. Then, slowly, she sank back into her chair. She looked like a child who had been scolded in a supermarket. Grandma held the microphone. She didn't look at the paper. She didn't look at the guests. She turned her entire body in her chair so she was facing me. Zara, she said. The patio was deadly silent. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Yes, Grandma? I said. Brianna says you have been stressed, Grandma said calmly. Your mother says you are unstable. Your father says you are sensitive. She paused. She looked me in the eye, and I saw a fierce intelligence burning there. I want to hear it from you, Grandma said. Why have you not spoken to your parents or your sister for 9 months? Why did you miss Easter? Why did you miss the 4th of July? She held the microphone out toward me, not giving it to me, but angling it so it would catch my voice. Tell me, she commanded. And tell these people, why did you leave? I looked at Brianna. She was shaking her head frantically, mouthing the word no. She was signaling that if I spoke, I would regret it. She was relying on my shame. She was relying on the fact that I had always been the peacekeeper. But I wasn't the peacekeeper anymore. I was the witness. I didn't stand up. I stayed seated, composed, my hands folded on the tablecloth. I left, I said, my voice steady and clear, amplified by the mic in Grandma's hand. Because Brianna stole the money from the repair fund. A gasp rippled through the crowd. Someone dropped a fork. That is a lie, Brianna shrieked, jumping up again. She is lying. She is off her meds. Sit down, Brianna, Grandma said, without looking at her. Let her finish, I continued, keeping my eyes on Grandma. We set up a fund to fix your hallway, I said. We needed to install handrails. We needed to put in a walk-in shower so you wouldn't slip. We needed to build a ramp for the front porch. I took a breath. I contributed $450 a month from my salary, I said. For 5 months, Brianna was supposed to match it. When I went to pay the contractor, the account was empty. There was $612 left. The rest had been spent on restaurants, concert tickets, and clothes. Oh my God, a cousin whispered at a nearby table. I went to Mom and Dad, I said, looking across the table at my parents. They were pale, staring at their plates. I showed them the bank statements. I asked for help, and they told me I was being selfish. They told me I should just cover it because Brianna was having a hard time. I looked back at Grandma. I didn't leave because I was stressed, I said. I didn't leave because I was sensitive. I left because I realized that in this family, stealing from you was considered acceptable, but holding them accountable was considered a betrayal. I stopped. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. It was the sound of a carefully constructed image shattering into 1,000 pieces. Brianna was breathing hard, her chest heaving. She looked at the crowd, desperate to salvage the situation. She is confused, Brianna stammered, her voice high and thin. She doesn't understand business. That was a loan. I borrowed the liquidity to help manage the family assets. It was a leverage play. I was going to pay it back with interest. She turned to Grandma, tears streaming down her face. Grandma, please, Brianna sobbed. You know I love you. You know I take care of you. Zara is just jealous. She has always been jealous of me. I would never steal from you. She was good. Even now. Cornered. She was good. The tears looked real. The shaking hands looked real. For a second, I saw some of the guests wavering, unsure who to believe. Grandma looked at Brianna. She studied her crying face with the detachment of a scientist looking at a specimen. You say you didn't steal, Grandma said. Never, Brianna cried. I would never. So the money in the repair fund just evaporated? Grandma asked. It was a mistake, Brianna pleaded. A banking error. I moved it to the wrong account. I can explain it all later, in private. We are done with private, Grandma said. Grandma reached down to the floor, where her large tote bag was resting. She pulled out a folder. It wasn't the leather folder Brianna had brought. It was a simple, beige manila folder. She opened it. She pulled out a stack of papers stapled together. I went to the bank on Tuesday, Grandma said. I had Mrs. Higgins drive me. We sat with the branch manager for 2 hours. Brianna went still. The crying stopped instantly. I asked for a full audit, Grandma said. Not just of the repair fund, but of the main account, the one your grandfather left for my care. She put the papers on the table. She smoothed them out. It is fascinating reading, Grandma said. I see the transfers you mentioned. Zara, the ones to Ticketmaster, the ones to Sephora. Grandma, wait. Brianna reached for the papers. Grandma slapped her hand away. It was a sharp, stinging sound. Don't touch them, Grandma snapped. She looked at the paper again. But here's the thing that confused me, Grandma said. She looked up, her eyes scanning the table until they landed on my father. Robert, she said, Dad looked up. He looked like a man facing a firing squad. He was sweating. Yes. Mama? He whispered. There are transfers here from last year, Grandma said. $3,000 in August, $2,000 in November, $4,000 in January. She paused. They didn't go to Brianna, Grandma said. They went to an account ending in 4421. She looked at Dad. That is your personal checking account, Robert, she said. The gasp from the crowd this time was audible. It was a collective intake of breath. I stared at my father. I hadn't known this. I knew about Brianna. I knew she was a leech. But Dad? My father, who always acted the hapless. Browbeaten husband? Robert? Mom whispered, looking at him. Robert, what is she talking about? Dad couldn't speak. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked at Brianna, then at Grandma, then at the table. You told me business was slow, Grandma said. Her voice was trembling now, not with age, but with heartbreak. You told me you needed help with the mortgage. I gave you checks. I wrote them out to you, but that wasn't enough, was it? Mama, Dad stammered. It was a loan. I was going to put it back. You have access to my digital banking, Grandma said. I trusted you. I gave you the password in case of an emergency, and you used it to drain the account dry. She looked at the papers again. There is barely enough left to pay the property taxes, Grandma said softly. She looked up at the three of them, her son, her daughter-in-law, her granddaughter. I thought I was losing my mind, Grandma said. I thought I was forgetting things. I would go to the grocery store and my card would be declined. And Brianna would tell me I had just forgotten to transfer the funds. You let me think I was going senile. She slammed the papers down on the table. The glasses rattled. You let me think I was losing my dignity, she said, her voice rising to a shout. So you could buy things you didn't earn. Brianna was shaking her head, backing away from the table. No, it is not like that. Grandma, you don't understand high finance. We were investing it for you. Investing? Grandma laughed. It was a bitter, jagged sound. In what? In your wardrobe? In your father's gambling debts? Dad flinched. Oh, Grandma said, nodding. You didn't think I knew about the gambling. Robert? A mother knows everything. I just chose to look away because I loved you. I thought you would stop. She looked at me. Zara told me the truth about the repair fund, Grandma said. And I realized that if you could steal the safety rails from an old woman, you could steal anything. The party was over. The guests were standing up, whispering, looking uncomfortable. Some were already walking toward their cars. This wasn't family drama anymore. This was a police report in the making. Brianna looked around the collapsing event. She saw her social standing evaporating. She saw the unity narrative burning to ash. She turned on me. Her face contorted into something ugly, something primal. This is your fault, she screamed, pointing a shaking finger at me. You did this. You poisoned her. You came here to ruin us. I came here to eat cake, I said calmly. You are a snake, Brianna yelled. You jealous, bitter little snake. You manipulated her. You want the money for yourself. She lunged toward the table, grabbing the microphone stand, perhaps to throw it, perhaps just to have something to hold. Stop it, Miles shouted. Everyone turned. Miles stood up from his chair. He was swaying slightly, but his eyes were focused. Stop lying, Brianna, Miles said. Shut up, Miles, Brianna hissed. Sit down and shut up. No, Miles said. He looked at Grandma. Mrs. Barnes? Lorraine? Yes. Miles? Grandma asked. The money isn't the only thing, Miles said. He took a deep breath, like a diver preparing to go under. Ask her about the loan. Ask her about the signature on the deed. Brianna's face went white, not pale, white, like a sheet of paper. Miles, if you say another word, I will divorce you, she whispered. Good, Miles said. He looked at me. He looked at the folder in Grandma's hand. "Because I don't want to go to prison for you." He looked at Grandma. "There is a deadline on Friday," Miles said, "because she forged your signature on a second mortgage, and the bank found out." The silence on the patio was absolute. Grandma looked at Brianna. She didn't look angry anymore. She looked devastated. "Is that true?" Grandma asked. Brianna opened her mouth to lie. I saw the gears turning. I saw her trying to find the angle, the spin, the escape hatch, but there was no escape hatch. The walls had closed in. I reached into my purse. My hand closed around the envelope Grandma had given me. Grandma looked at me. She saw I was ready. "Not yet, Zara," she said softly. She turned back to Brianna. "Get out," Grandma said. "Grandma, please." "Get out," Grandma pointed to the driveway. "Take your parents, take your husband, and get off my property." "But the party," Mom whispered, looking at the half-eaten cake. "The party is over," Grandma said. "Take your lies with you." Brianna stood there for a second, trembling with rage and humiliation. Then she grabbed her purse. She grabbed her folder. She didn't look at anyone. She turned and ran toward the driveway. Mom and Dad lingered for a second, looking at Grandma, looking for a reprieve. Grandma just stared through them. They turned and followed Brianna, heads bowed, looking like ghosts fading into the twilight. Miles stood there. He looked at Grandma. "I am sorry. Lorraine," he said. "Go," she said. He walked away. The guests were leaving in droves now. Engines were starting. Dust was rising from the gravel driveway. I sat there at the head table, alone with my grandmother and the ruins of her 80th birthday. Grandma picked up her fork. She took a bite of the cake that had been sitting in front of her. "It is a little dry," she said. Then she looked at me. "Open the envelope, Zara," she said. "It is time." Most people would have run. Most people, having been told by their 80-year-old grandmother to get off the property after being accused of a felony, would have cut their losses and fled. But Brianna was not most people. She was a narcissist in a cream-colored suit, and narcissists do not accept defeat. They rewrite reality until they are the victim. She did not go to the car. She stopped at the edge of the patio steps, her back to the garden, her hand gripping the railing so hard the tendons stood out like wire cables. She spun around. Her face was not the face of a sister anymore. It was a contorted mask of panic and rage, the makeup settling into the deep lines of stress around her mouth. "No!" Brianna screamed. It was a primal sound, one that stopped the few departing guests in their tracks. "I am not leaving. I am not letting her steal this family from me." She marched back toward the head table, her heels striking the wood decking like hammer blows. She ignored Grandma. She ignored Miles. She pointed a shaking finger directly at me. "You see what she's doing?" Brianna shouted to the crowd, her eyes wide and manic. "You all see it, don't you? Zara has hated me since we were children. She has always been jealous. She has always wanted to be the favorite, and now she is making up these insane lies to trap me." "Brianna, stop," I said calmly. I did not stand up. I remained seated, anchoring myself to the truth while she flailed in her own storm. "I will not stop," she shrieked. "She planted those bank statements. She manipulated the records. She has been plotting this for months, hiding in that little duplex of hers, figuring out how to frame me so she can grab the inheritance for herself." She turned to Mom, grabbing her arm with frantic desperation. "Mom, tell them," Brianna pleaded. "Tell them Zara has always been the difficult one. Tell them how she used to lie to get attention. Tell them she is doing this to hurt me." My mother looked at Brianna, then at the silent crowd, then at me. I saw the struggle in her eyes. It was the old instinct, the muscle memory of 30 years of enabling. She saw her golden child cracking, and her reflex was to apply glue. Even if the glue was made of lies. "She might be confused," Mom stammered, addressing the guests who were staring with morbid fascination. Mom forced a wobbly smile. Zara has been under a lot of strain. She creates scenarios in her head. She is just trying to ruin the party because she is unhappy. Please, everyone, just ignore this. It is just a sibling rivalry getting out of hand. I looked at my father. He was standing slightly behind Mom, staring at his shoes. He had not said a word since Grandma revealed the transfers to his personal account. He looked like a man made of ash, ready to crumble if the wind shifted. "Dad?" I asked. My voice was quiet, but it carried. "Am I making up scenarios? Or did you spend $4,000 of Grandma's money in January?" Dad looked up. His eyes met mine. For the first time in my life, I did not see the defensive patriarch. I saw a coward who knew he had been caught. He opened his mouth to speak, to defend Brianna, to defend himself, but the weight of the evidence choked him. He closed his mouth and looked away. "See?" Brianna yelled, seizing on his silence as proof of something else entirely. "Dad is too disgusted to even speak to you. You are humiliating him." She was gaining momentum. I could feel the energy in the room shifting slightly. The cousins were looking at each other, confused. Brianna was loud, passionate, and convincing in her hysteria. If I stayed silent, her volume might just drown out the facts, but I didn't have to speak. "Stop it," a voice rasped. It was Miles. He was standing by the punch bowl, swaying slightly, holding onto the table for support. But his eyes were clear, burning with the kind of clarity that only comes when you realize you have nothing left to lose. "Miles, shut up," Brianna hissed, turning on him. "You are drunk. Go to the car." "I am drunk," Miles admitted, raising his voice. "I am drunk because I cannot sleep. I am drunk because I know what you did." He stepped forward, stumbling over a chair leg but catching himself. He walked into the center of the patio, placing himself between Brianna and me. "She didn't make up the bank statements." "Brianna," Miles said. His voice was hoarse, broken. "And she didn't make up the loan application. I have the emails." Brianna froze. "You don't know what you are talking about." "I have the emails from the underwriter," Miles shouted, his voice cracking. "I have the warning letters from the title company. You used my email address as the recovery contact because you didn't want the alerts going to Grandma's house. I saw them all." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. He held it up like a piece of evidence. "I saw the PDF. Brianna," Miles said, tears starting to stream down his gray, tired face. "I saw the signature page. It is dated 3 months ago. Grandma was in the hospital with her hip that week. She couldn't have signed it. You traced it. I saw the practice sheets in your office trash can." The crowd gasped. This was not a vague accusation of stealing. This was specific. This was forensic. "You are lying," Brianna screamed, her face turning a violent shade of red. "You are drunk, and you are lying to hurt me because I make more money than you." "I am trying to save you from prison," Miles yelled back. "They are going to file on Friday. Brianna, the guy was here. I saw him serve you the papers by the garage. Zara saw him too." Brianna whipped her head around to look at me. Her eyes were wild, darting from Miles to me, realizing the walls were closing in from every side. She realized her narrative was dead. The victim card had expired. So she switched to the only weapon she had left: attack. She marched toward me, stopping only when the table was between us. She leaned over, her hands slamming down on the tablecloth, rattling the silverware. "You," she spat. "You did this. You orchestrated this entire thing. You got Miles drunk. You poisoned Grandma against me." "I didn't do anything," I said. "I just watched." "You watched?" She laughed, a high, hysterical sound. "You have been stalking us. You admitted it on the porch. You said you had cameras. You are sick, Zara. You are a voyeur. You record your own family because you are too pathetic to have a life of your own." She turned to the crowd, arms wide. "She records us," Brianna shouted. "She puts cameras up and spies on her own parents. Who does that? Only a psychopath does that. Everything she says is a manipulated, edited lie. She looked back at me, her eyes gleaming with hate. You think you have proof? She sneered. You have nothing but the word of a drunk man and your own twisted jealousy. Nobody believes you. Nobody is going to believe a sneak who tapes her family. I looked at her. She was breathing hard, thinking she had won, thinking she had turned the moral high ground into a debate about privacy rather than theft. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out my phone. You want to talk about the recording? I asked. My voice was calm, almost conversational. Put that away, Mom shouted, stepping forward. Zara, put that away right now. No, I said. I tapped the screen. I had the video queued up. I had connected my phone to the portable Bluetooth speaker that Brianna had been using for her jazz playlist. The connection hummed to life. You said I manipulated the truth, I said to Brianna. You said I edited the lies. Let's see what the raw footage says. I pressed play. The sound was not tinny. Through the high-quality Bose speaker Brianna had rented, the audio was crisp, deep, and deafening. Rustle of wind. Then, my mother's voice, booming across the silent garden. Is this better? But don't overdo it. If you wail, she'll know it's fake. Mom clamped her hands over her mouth. She stared at the speaker as if it were a bomb. Then, Brianna's voice, clear as a bell, dripping with irritation. You're slouching. Dad, stand up straight. You look like you're waiting for a bus. You're supposed to look heartbroken. The guests stood frozen. It was one thing to hear an accusation. It was another to hear the backstage direction of the con. Then, Dad's voice, mumbling the line that killed me. I just want to get this over with. Bree, maybe she's not even home. On the patio, the real Dad closed his eyes, shrinking into himself. But I wasn't done. I let it play. I let it play to the part that mattered. The audio crackled, and then came the sound of the compact mirror snapping shut. Click, and then Brianna's voice, the voice of the sister who claimed to love me, the voice of the woman who had just sworn she wanted family unity. She doesn't get to say no. We have to drag her to that party tomorrow. If she doesn't show up, Grandma is going to change the papers if Zara isn't there. The old woman might cut us all out. The gasp from the crowd was gone. In its place was a silence so profound it felt like a vacuum. It was the silence of 50 people realizing they had been breathing the same air as a monster. I let it run for 10 more seconds. Just keep it quiet. Silent tears are more effective. Only say we miss you. It makes her soft. I pressed pause. The silence stretched. It hung heavy and thick over the yard. I looked at Brianna. The color had drained from her face completely. The triumphant smirk was gone. The rage was gone. She looked like a ghost. She stood there, her mouth slightly open, staring at the speaker, unable to process that her own voice had just executed her. She looked around the yard. She saw the faces of her friends, her business associates, her cousins. She didn't see confusion anymore. She saw disgust. She saw judgment. That, Brianna whispered. Her voice was barely audible. That is out of context. Context? The word came from the left. Audrey Shaw stood up. She pushed her chair back. She adjusted her blazer. She walked around the table until she was standing next to me. She didn't look at Brianna. She looked at the crowd, addressing them like a jury. The video has a digital timestamp, Audrey said. Her voice was dry, gravelly, and carried the weight of 30 years of litigation. It is embedded in the metadata. 7:42 in the evening. Last night, she turned to Brianna. In a court of law, Audrey said. Recording a conversation in a public space, such as a front porch, where there is no expectation of privacy, is fully admissible, and regarding context, it is difficult to argue context when you are directing the scene yourself. Audrey paused, letting the legal reality sink in. There is no interpretation here, Brianna, Audrey said. You weren't visiting your sister. You were rehearsing a burglary. You just happened to be stealing a person instead of a television. Brianna looked at Audrey. She opened her mouth to argue, to scream, to threaten a lawsuit, but nothing came out. She was out of ammunition. She was out of allies. Mom was sobbing into her hands, but she wasn't moving to comfort Brianna. Dad was staring at the grass, looking like he wished the earth would swallow him. Miles was sitting on the ground, his head between his knees. And Grandma? Grandma Lorraine stood up. She didn't use the table for support this time. She stood up straight. She looked taller than she had in years. She looked at the devastation around her. The crying mother, the shamed father, the exposed granddaughter. She picked up the microphone that Brianna had dropped on the table. "Enough," Grandma said. It was a single word, but it carried the finality of a judge's gavel. "I have heard enough," Grandma said. "I have seen enough." She turned to me. Her eyes were sad, but they were proud. "Thank you, Zara," she said, "for bringing the light. It hurts my eyes, but I needed to see." She turned back to the crowd. "I had a speech prepared," Grandma said. "I was going to talk about the future. I was going to talk about who gets the house, who gets the silver, who gets the money." She looked at Brianna, who was shrinking back, looking small and terrified. "But I realized something today," Grandma said. "You cannot build a future on a foundation that is rotten, and you cannot give a gift to someone who is trying to steal it from your pocket while hugging you." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a pair of reading glasses. She put them on. "I am going to say what I intended to say," Grandma announced, "but the names have changed." She looked at me. "Zara," she said, "open the envelope." All eyes turned to me. I reached into my purse. My fingers trembled slightly as I pulled out the thin white envelope. I slid my finger under the flap and tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper, legal stationery, the letterhead of Audrey Shaw, attorney at law. I unfolded it. It wasn't a birthday card. It was a new title deed and a new power of attorney, dated today. I looked up at Grandma. "Read it," Grandma said. "Read the first line." I cleared my throat. My voice shook. Lorraine Marie Barnes. I read, "Being of sound mind and body, hereby revoke all previous powers of attorney and designate my sole agent and beneficiary." I stopped. I looked at the name. It wasn't Brianna. It wasn't Dad. "Read it," Grandma commanded. "To be Zara Elizabeth Barnes," I read. The silence broke. A collective murmur swept through the crowd. Brianna let out a sound that was half sob, half scream. She lunged forward, grabbing the edge of the table. "You can't do that!" she shrieked. "She tricked you! She is stealing it!" "She didn't ask for it," Grandma said, her voice cutting through the noise. "She didn't ask for a dime. She asked for a ramp. She asked for safety rails. She gave her own money to keep me safe, while you stole my safety to buy yourself a reputation." Grandma looked at the guests. "The party is officially over," she said. "Please go home. My granddaughter and I have work to do." She sat down. She picked up her fork. She took another bite of the dry cake, and as the guests began to scramble for the exits, fleeing the wreckage of the Barnes family dynasty, I looked at Brianna. She was standing there, stripped of her lies, stripped of her future, stripped of her power. She looked at me with pure, unadulterated hatred, but I didn't feel afraid. I didn't feel small. I looked at the Ring video still paused on my phone screen. Motion detected. The motion was over. The stillness had returned. And for the first time in my life, the silence wasn't heavy. It was free. The paper in my hand felt lighter than it should have. A single sheet of legal bond, watermarked and crisp, that weighed less than a feather but held enough gravity to crush the entire architecture of my family's dysfunction. I read the name again. Zara Elizabeth Barnes. It was ink on paper, yet it looked like a declaration of independence. Grandma Lorraine did not look at the paper. She looked at the people standing around the table. Her gaze was not angry. It was settling, like concrete pouring into a foundation. She reached into her tote bag one last time. She pulled out a second envelope, this one thick and sealed with tape. She slid it across the white tablecloth until it rested in front of Brianna. You wanted a plan. Brianna, Grandma said. Her voice was steady, stripping away the last remnants of the confused old lady act she had likely maintained for months just to survive. You wanted a financial roadmap. There it is. Brianna stared at the envelope. She didn't touch it. She looked like a gambler who had bet the house on a pair of twos and was now staring at a royal flush. What is this? Brianna whispered. Her voice was unrecognizable. Gone was the polished consultant. Gone was the stage director. This was the voice of a child who had broken a vase and realized the glue wouldn't hold. That is a repayment schedule, Audrey Shaw answered from beside me. Audrey didn't look up from her iced tea. She spoke with the casual lethargy of a shark that had already eaten. It outlines the terms for the restitution of the $28,900 you took from Zara, the $612 from the repair fund, and the unauthorized transfers from the main estate account. Restitution? Brianna choked out. Grandma, I can't. I don't have that kind of liquidity. Then you will find it, Grandma said. You will sell your car. You will sell your designer bags. You will liquidate that inventory you bought with your father's gambling money. I don't care how you do it. But every month, a check will arrive at Audrey's office. If a payment is late by a single day, the forbearance agreement is void, and we file civil charges for elder abuse and fraud. Brianna flinched as if she had been struck. She looked at Mom, pleading for intervention. Mom, Brianna gasped. She is talking about prison. She is talking about ruining my life. Mom opened her mouth. The old reflex was there. The instinct to jump in front of the bullet for her golden child. She took a breath, ready to say, "Oh, Mother, don't be so harsh." Or Brianna didn't mean it. But then Grandma shifted her gaze. She looked at her daughter-in-law. She looked at her son. "Don't," Grandma said. It wasn't a command. It was a warning. "The reason this family is rotten," Grandma said, her voice dropping to a register that vibrated in the wood of the table, "is not because Brianna is greedy. It is because you two taught her that her greed was more important than Zara's dignity." Mom closed her mouth. Her eyes filled with tears. But they weren't the performed tears from the porch. They were the tears of someone looking in a mirror they had avoided for 30 years. "You let one daughter cannibalize the other," Grandma continued, looking at my father. "You watched Brianna eat Zara alive, bite by bite, dollar by dollar, and you handed her the knife because it was easier than parenting. You called Zara selfish because she stopped bleeding for you. That ends today." Dad looked at me. He looked at the midnight blue dress I wore, the dress that was armor. He looked at the calm set of my jaw. He saw a stranger, and in his eyes, I saw the dawning realization that he had lost the only child who had ever actually taken care of him. "If you want to be in Zara's life," Grandma said, gesturing to me, "you will learn to speak the truth. If you lie to her again, if you ask her for money again, if you call her selfish one more time, you will not only lose her, you will lose me, and you will be written out of this will faster than ink dries." The silence that followed was total. Then, the scraping of a chair broke the spell. It was a guest, then another, then a whole table. The party didn't end with a toast. It ended with an evacuation. The guests, realizing they were spectators to a family autopsy, began to flee. There were no goodbyes. No one came up to wish Grandma a happy birthday. They just grabbed their purses, avoided eye contact, and hurried toward the gravel driveway. The sound of car engines starting up filled the air. Doors slammed, tires crunched. Within 5 minutes, the yard was empty. Only the debris remained. Half-eaten cake plates, empty champagne flutes, the wind flapping the edges of the white tablecloths, and us. Brianna stood alone near the edge of the patio. Her husband had already walked to his car. Her parents were standing awkwardly by the back door, looking like ghosts. Brianna looked at me one last time. Her face was a ruin of mascara and hate. "You think you won," she hissed. "You think you are special now." "I don't think I won," I said quietly. "I think I just survived you." "Go home." "Brianna," Grandma said, picking up her fork again. "And don't come back until you have the first check." Brianna turned and walked away. She didn't run this time. She walked with a stiff, jerky gait, like a marionette whose strings had been cut. I watched her car drive away, tailgating my parents' sedan as they exited the property. I sat there in the quiet garden. The sun was setting, casting long, golden fingers of light across the hydrangeas. The air smelled of rain and sugar. "The cake is actually quite good if you get past the frosting," Grandma said. I looked at her. She was eating calmly, as if she hadn't just executed a family dynasty. "Are you okay?" I asked. She looked at me and smiled. It was a tired smile, but it was light. "I am 80 years old, Zara," she said. "I don't have time for bad actors. I prefer a small cast, a real cast." She reached out and covered my hand with hers. "Happy birthday, Grandma," I whispered. "Happy Freedom Day, Zara," she replied. The fallout did not happen overnight. It happened in slow, agonizing increments over the next 3 weeks, like a building settling into the earth after an earthquake. Miles filed for a legal separation 4 days after the party. I heard through Audrey that he had gone to the bank himself, before they could file the default notice, and turned over the emails proving he had tried to stop the forgery. He threw himself on the mercy of the fraud department, because of his cooperation, and because Grandma refused to press criminal charges as long as the debt was serviced. The bank agreed to a settlement. Brianna was not so lucky. The internal investigation at her consulting firm, triggered when the bank contacted them to verify her assets, revealed that she had been commingling client funds. She wasn't arrested, but she was fired. She lost her license. She lost her stage. She had to move into a small apartment in North County. She had to sell the SUV. She had to sell the designer clothes. And she had to write a check to Audrey Shaw's office on the 1st of the month. I didn't see her. I didn't speak to her. But I saw the canceled check when Audrey forwarded me the receipt. It was for $500. It wasn't much, but it was real. It was the first honest money Brianna had spent in years. My parents were a different story. For 2 weeks, silence, no texts, no calls, no guilt trips about missing Sunday dinner. Then, on a Tuesday morning, I received an email. The subject line was simply, "I am sorry. It was from Dad. Zara, I don't know how to fix this. I know I can't fix this with words. I just wanted you to know that I have taken a job at the hardware store. It is part-time. I am going to pay your grandmother back. I am not going to ask you for anything. I just wanted you to know. Dad." It was short, it was awkward, but it was the first time in my life he hadn't asked me to solve his problem. I didn't reply. Not yet. Forgiveness is a garden. You can't force it to grow in winter. But I didn't delete the email. I filed it in a new folder. Not the truth, just Dad. Mom was quieter. She sent a card. It didn't say sorry. It just said, "Thinking of you." But she didn't call me selfish. She didn't ask why I wasn't helping Brianna. For a woman like my mother, the absence of criticism was the loudest apology she was capable of making. My life settled into a new rhythm. I still lived in my duplex. I still worked my shifts at the dispatch center, but the silence in my home wasn't heavy anymore. It was expansive, every Sunday. I drove to the cottage at the edge of the suburbs. I didn't knock. I used my key. Grandma and I would sit on the back porch. We would drink tea. We would weed the garden, pulling out the invasive vines that tried to choke the hydrangeas. We didn't talk about Brianna. We didn't talk about the money. We talked about books. We talked about the birds that came to the feeder. We talked about the future. It was a small family, just 2 people and a garden, but it was solid. It was real. One afternoon, 6 weeks after the party, my phone buzzed. It was a text from a number I had blocked, but my carrier had a glitch that sometimes let blocked messages through to a spam folder. I opened it out of habit. It was from Brianna. "I hope you are happy. You took everything from me. You turned them all against me. You are the thief. Zara, you stole my life." I looked at the words. 6 months ago. A text like that would have destroyed me. I would have spiraled. I would have typed out paragraphs defending myself. I would have cried. I would have felt that familiar, crushing weight of guilt, the fear that maybe she was right. Maybe I was the bad sister. But as I sat there on my porch, watching the sun hit the leaves of my snake plants, I felt nothing. No anger, no guilt, no need to explain. I didn't reply. I didn't take a screenshot. I simply pressed delete. Then I went into the settings and hard blocked the number again. I didn't hate her. Hate requires energy. Hate is a connection. I didn't want a connection. I wanted peace. I realized then that Brianna was never going to change. She was drowning. But she wasn't looking for a life raft. She was looking for someone to stand on so she could keep her head above water. I just refused to be the floor anymore. People call what I did revenge. They look at the video, the exposed bank statements, the public shaming, and they see a woman settling a score. But to me, it wasn't revenge. It was an exhale. It was the first time I stopped abandoning myself to keep the peace for people who never kept me. It was the moment I realized that family isn't the people who share your blood. It is the people who share your respect. I put my phone down. I picked up my book. The Ring camera light on the porch was solid blue, watching the world. But I didn't need to check it. I was safe. I was whole. And for the first time in 34 years, the house was quiet, and I wasn't waiting for the bell to ring. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. Are you listening from your car, your kitchen, or maybe your own front porch? Let me know in the comments below so we can share this moment together. Please don't forget to subscribe to Leona Revenge Stories, like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story reach more people who need to hear that it is okay to choose yourself. Stay safe, and see you in the next one.